call the Howell Township Thursday, June 20th, 2019 meeting to order. Eileen, read the opening statement, please.
I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 4th, 2019, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Star-Ledger and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 4th, 2019, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 4th, 2019, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are on your right at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. Boyle's been excused. Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Kudrick?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Tannenhouse has been excused. Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Everett's been excused. Deputy Mayor O'Donnell has been excused. And Chairman Nash.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops abroad and our first responders. Chief?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, before we get into our agenda, we have a significant and heavy agenda tonight. So I've spoken with the attorneys for the 2 major applications that we'll be hearing tonight, the Monmouth Commerce Center and the Hovnanian Four Seasons at Colts Farm, I'm sorry. Both those applications, I'm going to have them present for about an hour and a half so that both those applications can be heard. The first one of those 2 will be Monmouth Commerce Center, and then we'll close out the night with Hovnanian. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that schedule. Like right now, we need to first go through some resolutions. So the first resolution to be memorialized is case number SP 1051, Cornerstone Calvary Chapel. It's a resolution granting preliminary major site plan approval. Eligible voters are Mr. Dorado, Mr. Hooser, and myself.
And Mr.
And Mr. Seaman, I'm sorry. Gentlemen, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to memorialize the resolution granting preliminary major site plan for case number SP 1051.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Mr. Dorado?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Chairman Nash.
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized.
Thank you. The next resolution to be memorialized is case number SP 1061, New Jersey American Water Company. It's a resolution granting submission waivers. Eligible voters, Mr. Hooser, Chief Kudrick, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Gentlemen, do I have a motion?
I make a motion to memorialize case number SP 106.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider.
I will second.
Chief Kudrick seconds.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Chairman Nash.
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized.
The next one is case number SD 2946X It's Perry and Janice Willett, also known as Hawk Point. It's a resolution granting second one-year extension of time. Eligible voters are Mr. Hooser, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Gentlemen, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to memorialize the resolution granting second one-year extension of time for case number SD 2946X.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
yes,
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Chairman Nash?
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on our agenda. First up is a review of submission waivers. We have case number SP 1009A, Par Golf. It's an amended preliminary and final major site plan. It's application of Par Golf LLC as applicant and Eagle Golf Enterprises LLC as owners seeking amended preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct a pool and patio area where a tennis court was located and relocate the tennis court on premises known as Block 185, lots 40.01 and 37 at 20 Shore Oaks Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board professionals. My name is Todd Cohen. I'm the attorney for Par Golf LLC, the applicant. As you stated, this is a very simple application for the relocation of a tennis court and addition of a swimming pool to an already developed site that has been through numerous site plan approvals. While the waiver list is lengthy, we don't feel that any of the information will be needed to properly review the application, and would ask for your professionals to weigh in on that at this time.
Mr. Matlack,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you...
your
look
mic
at-
isn't on.
It's the... I don't know that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at page 3 of our engineer's review letter, it lists all of the requested waivers for checklist submission items. Based on the nature of the application and the site's history with the board, we have no objection to these requested waivers.
Does the board have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the submission waivers for case number SP 10098.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Who was that second?
Mr.
Thank
Castro.
you. Mr. Dorado?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes,
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Chairman Nash?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for your time this evening.
Next application is an extension of time. It's for case number SD 2930-A2/SP 914-A2, Boulder Ridge 2 at Howell. It's application of Boulder Ridge 2 at Howell LLC as applicant and owner seeking a one-year extension of time on their approval per resolution dated January 19th, 2017, to construct 155 residential lots, 4 open space lots, and 1 clubhouse recreation lot on premises known as Block 183, lots 109.01, 109.02, 110, 111, and 112. The address is 1521 State Route 33. They are also seeking to amend Condition 6 of the 2017 approval. After some testimony and discussion on May 16, 2019, this application was rescheduled to June 20th, 2019, with a new notice to the public.
Mr. Chairman, John Junko appearing on behalf of the applicant. We're going to withdraw the request to amend condition number 6. There were some objections raised by the Township Engineering Department, so we're going to forego that for now, and we just ask the board to consider the extension. The board may recall at the last hearing, I was able to report that there were some outstanding permits remaining from NJDOT, and that a delay had been incurred by a required revision to our sewer delivery system. Since that time, I can update that report that there now remains two outstanding documents related to one approval. That's the NJDOT permit and the NJDOT developers agreement, both of which we have been informed by our engineer, I've been informed by our project engineer, have progressed to the point that they are waiting for the Deputy Attorney General to complete the developers agreement. So I would request the extension for 1 year.
Mr. Junko, also, if you could confirm, there has not been a zone change since the original approval?
Correct, there have been no zone changes.
Board have any questions? Do I have a motion granting the 1-year extension of time?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Schneider is the second.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
And Chairman Nash.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a document to deliver on Monday. Thank you.
Okay, next one is case number SP 1052, Monmouth Commerce Center preliminary and final major site plan with ancillary bulk variance. Application of Monmouth Commerce Center LLC as applicant and Lawrence Katz and Felix Feister as owners seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval with ancillary bulk variance and design waivers and exceptions to construct 9 warehouses, buildings ranging in size from 85,600 square feet to 150,000 square feet and equating approximately 1,242,102 square feet in total. 5 full movement access drives along Randolph Road, parking for 706 vehicles and 142 trailer parking spaces, 234 loading spaces, and 5 monument-style site identification signs on premises known as Block 5, Lots 2 and 3, at the intersection of Randolph Road and Oak Glen Road. This application was originally scheduled to be heard on April 4th, 2019, when it was rescheduled to May 9th, 2019, after some testimony was placed on the record. On May 9th, 2019, this application was carried to June 6th, 2019, with no further notice. After some additional testimony on June 6th, 2019, this application was carried to June 20th, 2019, with no further notice. Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Merrill Goncher, Sills, Cummis and Gross, representing Monmouth Commerce Center LLC. You've noted the dates we appeared previously. As the board will recall, this is a continuation of our application for preliminary and final site plan approval, together with 1C variance and some design waivers or exceptions. We are also seeking extended vested rights for the site plan approval. At the end of the June 6th meeting, we had completed our direct testimony with regard to our civil engineer. I believe the board and the public had satisfied themselves with their questions of that witness, and the objector's counsel also cross-examined our witness that evening. Tonight, we'd like to start with our architect this evening, Rick Pratt, if we can call him and have him sworn.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Rick Pratt, P-R-A-T-T.
You have to, Mr. Pratt, you have to hold that mic very close to your mouth.
Rick Pratt, P-R-A-T-T.
Are you picking me up all right from this?
Yes, you're fine.
I'm loud, is what you're saying. Okay. All right. Rick, could you please tell the board with whom you are associated and give them a brief recitation of your educational and professional background and licenses that you hold?
I'm the owner of Pratt Design Studio located in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. I'm licensed in New Jersey as well as other states. I have a degree in architecture from Drexel University. I've been a licensed architect in New Jersey and other states for 24 years, designing warehouses in the Northeast for over 20 years. I have 12 years of experience in Hightstown as a member of the planning board there, and I've testified before numerous boards, however, not in Howell.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
we forgot to do it at the beginning, but since we've just begun the qualification of the witness, I think counsel for the objectors, if he can enter his appearance and if he has any objections to the qualifications.
Okay.
I'm Mark Calaguire, firm Florio, Perucci, Steinhardt, and Capelli, representing the objector, Hope.
Can you just
I have
spell your last name for us,
objection
counsel?
to his qualifications. Sir?
Counsel, can you just spell your last name?
Sure, it's Caliguire.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, just for the record, counsel's office did submit a letter revising their list of clients. Apparently, they removed one of the names from the list. So
Okay.
that's part of the record.
And I
Okay.
marked that as Exhibit 02.
Does that have to be marked or
It has
anything?
been.
It has been.
Okay, thank you, counsel.
All right, Mr. Pratt, I just want to ask, your license is current with the New Jersey Professional Board?
Yes.
Do you have any pending or prior actions against you?
No, never.
Okay. We'll accept Mr. Pratt as an expert in architecture.
Thank you for accepting his credentials. All right, can you, just to orient the board, just confirm that the plans that we are referring to by their date, if you have the most current set?
Yeah, and I just, does the board have the electronic version of the rendering on file from a couple of meetings ago? It wasn't submitted as a formal submission, but there should be an electronic. I have another one here if needed.
Is it the bottom one's architectural plans?
That's just the plans.
Those aren't the render. Was it on a separate?
We had a flash drive from the first meeting.
No, it's a good idea to deal with it now. You want to start? The plan set that was submitted. Let's see.
So the exhibits that were submitted, formally submitted, we have Building D, overall floor plan, sheet A 2.0, dated 2/22/19. Building D elevations, sheet A 4.0, dated 2/22/19.
I believe those are A5 on the exhibit list that were marked.
Okay, Building E, overall floor plan, sheet A 2.0, dated 2/29/19. And Building E elevations, sheet A 4.0, dated 2/29/19.
And that would be A11, I think, on your list.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excuse me one sec. Eileen, do we have those exhibits?
You may have them on, I don't know if you have them or not, but we're going to put them up here.
Okay.
Those were part of the original submission. We're just confirming that there have been no changes, that the date on the exhibit is the date that the plan we're working from.
I understand. I don't think the board has that
No,
exhibit up there.
typically, they only give us the site plans in the smaller versions.
Okay. So we'll go by what's up on the screens.
Did they locate the other?
Here, we're just,
Building D and elevations and site plans.
we just don't know which one you want.
No, there was another one.
There's a rendering on here, I gave that.
Did they locate it, we think?
I gave them the one.
Oh, okay. Is that the one you wanted, or you just want to speak first before they put that up? You need it up there while you...
I don't.
All right, why don't we get started then?
All right.
All right.
I-
Can you just describe what's proposed in terms of the buildings on the site, the number of them, and then, if you would, describe what we're proposing?
There are 9 buildings planned for this site. 8 of them, buildings A through D, will be similar size and dimension. The 9th, building E, slightly smaller and shallower from front to back. All 9 buildings will be similar in design. All right, so do you want to come up with an exhibit number for that one?
Are you going to speak to it now? Okay. I think, are we up to A17?
We're up to A21.
Okay, then I obviously was marking it on a different sheet.
I gave Adam a new one.
Oh, he has it, okay. Yep. I made them in my notes, not on the list, okay.
All right, so we can start with either of the 2 elevation sheets.
Well, what are we naming A21?
Renderings,
Is
2
that-
2 views.
Which building is this?
This is building D. The upper view is directly at the corner of building D. The lower view is kind of down the middle of between D and E, with D on the right.
The building D and E color renderings,
Right.
is that okay?
Yep.
All right.
And you prepared, you prepared it or under your supervision?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess we go back to the elevation sheet, either building D or E, it doesn't matter, A 4.0.
So are you asking?
Asking to have that up on the screen.
Okay.
Building D.
D or E,
Is that, do you care
No.
which? You want an elevation, that's a floor
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, the elevation.
There.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a typo on the elevations on both of them. They're in essence the same. The footprint of the building is slightly different, but the elevations are very similar. There's an overall height of 45'5", which is a typo. So that should read 45 feet, and we will revise the drawings to conform with zoning. The plan and elevations of the submitted buildings include indents. They can be seen here. There's some shadows, and then on the plan, it's a little easier to tell the indents. If you want to just shoot back to
The colored
one of the
rendering?
other, the floor plan, not the rendering, floor
Not the
plans.
floor plan?
Yeah.
Okay, back. That's it.
So there's indentations along all 4 faces of the building to comply with the requirement from the ordinance. However, the ordinance requires that they be 50 feet, no more than 50 feet apart, and there are instances where that is longer than 50 feet. So we'll revise and add additional indents to meet the ordinance. The number of indents and their width may vary by building due to the length of the wall. But the viewing in perspective along the length of the wall will be hard to notice the difference, but there'll be probably a couple of additional indents. The look will largely be the same as it is now. All the buildings will contain similar features to comply with zoning.
So this is what you're addressing is that we are not seeking a waiver. We will not exceed the permitted length of wall without a break in the wall treatment or the depth of the wall.
Correct.
We'll meet that, which
Right.
is a 50-foot requirement that there be that detail every 50 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we could go back to the rendering now. The building materials will be concrete wall panels with reveals, which you can see kind of the narrow strips that run horizontally. Windows, doors, and color changes. The windows are in the foreground, and then there's some punched windows beyond the corner, and then there's a vertical strip window just to the left of the main entrance there. The colors, there's 3 shades of gray. And like I said, all the buildings will be generally the same design from a color standpoint as well. The concrete walls are 8-inch thick reinforced concrete, and will therefore satisfy the bollard language in the ordinance.
To understand, the bollards are a requirement that there is an intention to have some kind of material or structure that would prevent an accident where a vehicle would be able to drive into or overshoot the parking and end up in the building. And is your testimony that because of the 8-inch reinforced concrete, that will preclude that kind of incident from happening without bollards?
Yes.
So how are you going to treat the area where there's glass?
Well, we have, you can't tell from the rendering, but what we are going to have is a column behind the mullions. It'll be a rectangular steel column that's inside the building rather than outside, and that'll be a structural column that'll stop a car.
That will not be visible from the outside?
Right.
Well, that structural column, when you say column, I'm assuming it's a vertical member.
Vertical member, but a tube-shaped or a rectangular-shaped tube, vertical member.
And how far apart are those columns going to be spaced? I mean, there's an expanse of glass there. I'm looking at the white car on the
Right.
top
But
view.
is it possible to zoom in? So there are mullions there, so, okay, that's good. Right behind the woman is a set of double doors. There are 6-foot double doors. So on either side of those, there's a mullion. There'll be a column there. And then, again, to the right, in one direction, to the left, in the other direction of those doors, there's a mullion. There'll be a column there. And unless we have,
What's the width of the approximate width? Do you have a dimension for what the space is from the mullion closest to the exterior wall or the corner to that concrete corner?
okay, so without pointing. So from the concrete corner, the first mullion in is about 5 feet away. The next one, which is the jamb of the door, is about 2.5 feet. 6 feet for the door opening, 2.5, 5.
So is it your testimony then that given the location of those steel structures, that a vehicle would not be able to go through, that it would be caught by one of those structures, either concrete or steel?
Yes.
Okay. You want to move on now and describe some of the environmentally forward-thinking elements that we are going to incorporate?
We're not seeking LEED certification, but there are elements that would contribute to LEED points, such as white roof to decrease solar gain. The roof will be designed for future solar panels. All of the steel structure will be recycled steel, and the concrete, where possible, will include recycled content, and there will be LED lighting throughout the interior.
Excuse me, I don't see bollards behind the cars on the diagram.
We just went over that, Paul.
We're not proposing bollards. We're proposing the testimony was that the building itself is 8-inch thick reinforced concrete, and in the area where there's glass, where there is not concrete at base level, we're proposing to reinforce the mullions with steel panels behind them. So it will accomplish the same objective as bollards outside. That's our request.
You just mentioned about there's possibility of future solar, okay? If that solar doesn't come to fruition, or until that solar comes to fruition, would the applicant consider going with a green roof?
You have to speak to.
The green roof is, it's very heavy. And it's so that the steel will be reinforced to accept the solar panels, but the cost prohibitive for a warehouse of the spans that we have to reinforce the steel enough to have a green roof.
I understand that, but you have a very, very large detention basin. And going with a green roof would obviously allow for a reduction in the size of that, since that stormwater runoff wouldn't get to the detention basin. I would like that something that the applicant at least considering, and when we come back at the next hearing, to address that.
Okay.
We'll discuss it with the client.
And lastly, the buildings are designed so that each tenant will exceed the ordinance minimum square footage of 5,000 square feet. The objective is to have larger tenant spaces than the minimum. We anticipate that each tenant will need a small office space, which historically, in my experience, is less than 10%.
I think that is really all that we have in our direct testimony for this witness.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. It's going to be possibly multiple tenants in the building, all right? Can you explain to me, or can you show the floor plan of how those tenants, I mean, I see only one ingress to the building.
Right? So if we zoom out a little bit on the plan,
You need it further?
no, so
I don't-
So I'm trying to do this without pointing, but on the left side of the plan in the front between column line 1 and 2, there's an entrance. That's the exact mirror of the rendering view. So there's a set of double doors and an indent. So that corner would be a likely corner. There's windows between 1 and 2, actually between 1 and the next. There's an indent between 2 and 3. So from that indent all the way to the left to the corner, there are windows. Wrapping around the left side between G and F, halfway to E, there's another indent. So from that second indent to the corner, there are knockouts planned. So that is that the concrete panels will be designed that windows could be cut in if there's a tenant on that corner. Moving over to the right, in the middle of the building at column line 6, you'll see a set of double doors, and that's flanked by indents as well. So from indent to indent, it could be the tenant, depending on how big the tenant is and how far their office requirement is, they could go a little further either way. And then back to the right, that's the viewed corner from the rendering, similar to the left. From the right-hand corner to the second indent to the left has windows. The first indent to the left is a full-height window. And then wrapping around the corner again to the second indent, there are windows. And those windows are there. They're planned right away. So from the corner point, the left side is future windows, and the right side is now windows. And then as far as cutting the building with a tenant for a walls would be on a column line, in all likelihood, so that it falls between a dock door. So it could be at 3, it could be at 4, 5, I mean,
Well, Mr. Pratt, what I'm concerned about is there going to be a center aisle that's double loaded, if you will? What I'm concerned about is that this could be potentially turned into a maze for responding first responders if there's an incident, especially if there's a fire.
I understand. So typically, on a building of this size. There are racks, generally the racks run perpendicular to the wall that the docks are on. So it's a straight shot in from the dock wall, and then and it depends on the tenant. Some tenants don't need long lengths of racking, some do. And then there would be a horizontal, what they call a tunnel, which is just racking that goes overhead, and it has exit lighting and egress, exit signs and egress lighting. There are also doors. The building code requires a door every 100 feet. There's actually doors closer than that because there's a door at every indent. And not saying that there's, with the new 50-foot thing, that there'll be a door at every indent. It'll meet the building, the fire code for fire department ingress is 100 foot on center.
So, in answer to the chairman's concern, the building will be designed and it will be broken out, still in compliance with all applicable building codes, including the fire codes, fire subcode.
Yes.
Has this been discussed with the chief of Station 19-4? That's, Chief, that's the responding station, right?
Ramtown, correct.
Yeah. I think the last meeting I had asked the civil engineer to discuss about with the chief from 19-4.
Ramtown, is that what it's called?
That's the Ramtown Firehouse,
They
yes.
did meet,
Okay.
and I can paraphrase, but we can certainly call Mr. Catani back. He was advised that, that they do not review, is that correct? They do not review the application? Yeah, we went to speak to them. It was initially based upon some access concerns. And although we went to their meeting, which was since the last meeting, I believe, and they were told that they don't comment on that. So did we discuss anything else specific? That's what we were sent to discuss at the time, was just access, so we didn't ask other questions. We assume that whatever the circulation is to the appropriate departments or divisions, that it would have been circulated, and if they had comments, we've gotten a lot of comments, so. Who's the gentleman? Who did you remember that you went there to discuss the access? Did you ask them?
Yes.
Was it the chief? Was it the?
No, completely drawing a blank.
Okay, we'll come up with the name.
I think
What was the meeting?
it was the commissioner, the division.
No, what was the
meeting.
date? It was since the last meeting.
Yes.
Like
it
the
was
11th?
Yeah, Tuesday the 11th.
Okay. I think it was the Tuesday actually after our last meeting, that when they met, that's when we were there. So
I hear the testimony, all right, and I understand it's going to be in conformance with the building code. It just seems to me that there's a potential that this can turn into a maze because of the varying of the spaces based upon tenant needs.
Well, my guess is, all right. What I'm advised is that Ramtown had said that the only thing that they do is review the location of the hydrants, and that they had reviewed them and they were okay with those.
Can I just,
Yes.
Eileen, did we get any response from the Fire Bureau?
Yes. I can pull them out.
There was a response. We have it was attached.
Yeah,
One concern was the fire hydrants.
that's all they
My
commented
guess
on,
is you
Chief?
have to go
Yeah,
with the
there was a
plan
couple
when
other,
you get a
I'll
tenant,
pull it
go
up.
proceed
I was
about.
reviewing it the other day.
Well, that's construction, but then when a tenant comes in, even assume you didn't have to change it, give them approval.
It's
Yeah, but
March
if you
14th,
have to get a C of O, they look at
Was
the
it
plan.
March 14th,
Is that when it was?
if you're looking for the letter.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me see if I can,
B2 and B15 are the Fire Bureau reports.
12. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that's what you were looking for. We have one dated 3/14/19 and 11/21/18.
Yeah. They only commented on
The width of the drive to accommodate the trucks and the location of the fire hydrants.
Yeah. Okay. Board have any questions?
Are there any floor drains outside of the restrooms proposed for any of the warehouses?
Right now, there aren't any restrooms.
Okay, there's no restrooms. Interesting.
You mean they aren't located?
Well, it's a building shell. So when there's a tenant, there will likely be a floor drain.
Within the restroom, will there be any inside the warehouse itself?
Floor drain, all right, so floor drains aren't, I don't believe they're required to be in a toilet, but they do put them in a toilet room, so it wouldn't be outside though.
No, I'm asking in the warehouse itself, outside of the restrooms, in the main,
Other than
Other than the
Other than
restrooms.
if they're in the restrooms, would there be floor drains? Would you normally design floor drains into the warehouse proper?
No, not unless there was some process requirement, but it's not a normal thing to put a floor drain in.
okay. And then the dock levelers, are they hydraulic or electric?
I don't know yet. We haven't gotten that far with
Gotcha.
the construction documents.
So that would be part of a next step if this was approved. Those kinds of things would be shown in the plans that went to the building department for permit?
Yes.
Does it? Anyone else have questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question, unless anyone from the board have any other questions?
No?
Okay, thank you. Could you briefly discuss rooftop equipment and the type of locations and potential screening?
Yep. So the buildings are planned to be what's referred to as a single slope roof, kind of like a shed, but not so steep. So the high side of the roof will be, or let's start at the easier one is to say, the low side of the roof is along the docks, and then the high side is the other side. But it's, again, it's not a steep slope. So the rooftop equipment for the warehouse is generally just air changing. It's not air conditioning, so it's not a large unit. There's multiple units, but they would be towards the loading dock side, and they would be not visible from the roadway. There could be through a driveway. You might be able to see down a ways on a long view. You might see a little bit of something, but it's not likely. And then at the offices, there'll be smaller rooftop air conditioning units, but on the corners, we have some parapet height that'll block the sight line.
Is the office going to be second-story office within the building?
Again, it's too soon to guess. There is the possibility we have, we don't have windows planned for it's a mezzanine, but windows could be cut into the panels to put in a mezzanine. It depends on the tenant. Some tenants don't like mezzanines because it takes time to go up and down the stairs.
Something I was thinking about, and this may not even be a question for you, so if not, I apologize. Obviously, the nature of the tenants are unknown at this point.
Right.
But with the amount of warehousing, it's, easy enough to assume there's kind of a wide variety of businesses. How would anything coming in with like a hazmat type of use and storage impact the plan? Would there be other infrastructure that'd be required, or refrigeration or anything of that nature?
Well, there's 3 levels of HAZ. So there's H1, 2, and 3. H1 can't even go inside the building. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what 2 and 3 are. I've never had a warehouse in the 20 years that I've done warehouses where we've had a need for an H use inside of the building. There are hazardous materials. The building code allows a certain amount of different materials, aerosols, touch-up paint, cleaners, things like that. And they're all listed in the building code as to how much is allowed. And then if going over that is just something is not done. Sometimes I did a building for Volkswagen, and they had a whole bunch of airbags, and that wasn't even considered that big of a deal because the amount of hazardous material in each airbag was infinitesimal and not very big.
Mr. Chair, and I guess Ron, if you could chime in too. I mean, what I'm hearing, and I don't want to dwell on this, but what I heard is there wouldn't be floor drains in the warehouse outside of the bathrooms unless a tenant may require that. And it sounds like we're looking at plans where we understand that the tenants right now are unknown, but we're also looking at plans where we don't know what the interior of the building is going to be. We don't know what the dock levelers are. Are they hydraulic? Is hydraulic oil going to be in them? Is a floor drain going to be in there? Could a potential tenant have a spill which enters the floor drain, and then we're dealing with that? So can we make recommendations on that, or do we need to know that right now?
So generally speaking, in site plan review, what you're reviewing are the requirements of the local ordinance and what that ordinance requires of a design. So if those are things that are within the local ordinance, then yes. Some of those things may, and we'd have to defer to other professionals, if they impact things like drainage, the location of structures, then there are things that, become relevant to us. So to the extent that they impact those things that are explicitly in the ordinance, yes, those are questions that we can have answered right now. To the extent that they don't really impact ordinance requirements or any requirements from other outside agencies, then certainly you can request, but you couldn't deny, based upon that.
I can offer two short examples. One is we did a small oil storage warehouse. Oil is slow moving, and there were no floor drains. They did containment gutters, basically, around the perimeter, and they had means to sop up the oil until it could be taken care of and somebody come and take it away. No floor drains. So it was just a contained gutter to accommodate what was the largest spill. Another warehouse I did was for L'Oreal, so they had perfume. A calculation was done to determine how much perfume could possibly spill and contaminate, and they put curbs at all the doors. So also no floor drains. So if your concern is about contamination like that, in my experience in doing this, there haven't been instances where there have been floor drains that something would go down it.
Well, can I ask this question? Whether there is a floor drain or whether a spill is handled in some other fashion, would that impact the location of any of the proposed structures or anything else that's depicted on the plans?
No.
So no matter which option you go with, the design that we see here tonight and the public sees here tonight would not change at all?
No change.
Okay.
You okay now? Counselor, I'm looking at our planner's April 1st, 2019 review letter, planning review number 2, and I direct your attention to page number 9.
I'm catching up, just give me a second to get. Planning review number 2, April 1?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, page 9.
Page 9, please. Items number, it looks like V and W. If you could please address those.
Oh, signs.
We talked about that during the civil review, I believe. A monument sign and a corner number sign.
I think this is referring to, V is referring to wall facade signs.
Right, the only sign on the building will be a number for identifying, or a letter, might not be a number. On the corner for identification for for first responders, as well as for people trying to figure out which building to go to.
So Amazon comes in and takes the entire building. Amazon's still going to have, the building is still going to say B or C or whatever it might be.
Then if Amazon wants a big sign, they come back and see you about
They
that.
would need to get a separate approval. We're not seeking that at this time, no.
Okay, fine.
Mhm.
All right. And you want to address W about, Peter, does W really apply now since they're not asking for any signs?
Other than the identification.
Yeah, not really, and to the extent that it does factor in, they addressed that to my satisfaction by the last witness.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
All right, does the board have any more questions of this witness? We'll invite the objector attorney up to cross-examine this witness.
I have no questions for this witness.
Okay, seeing that you have no questions, I will now open it up to the public. You can ask questions of this witness. There will be a time later on when you can make statements. Would anyone like to please ask questions? If so, please step forward, be sworn.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to swear them in, even if they're just asking questions? Or wait
No.
till they testify?
Wait till he
And
testifies.
Okay.
So these are questions of the architect?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
We just need you to state your name, spell it, and give us your address.
Joan Osborne, Osborne, 28 Bronia Street, Howell. Talking about the question that you were just asked about the floor drains, and you indicated no architectural changes would be necessary. Would there be anything on the site plan engineering-wise that might need to be changed if they went from one system to another to control any types of spills, to ensure that any hazardous material wouldn't be draining into the detention basin or the river eventually?
Anything coming from the building would be contained either in the building or in a special well outside of the building, but it wouldn't be connected to the storm drains. And that would be something that would be handled as a separate, probably a separate application or a separate approval.
Okay.
Ms. Osborne, just before you get to the next question, the special well, was that something that was depicted on the plan?
No, I think what he said, go ahead.
Not a well, a box, something that it drains into.
Some sort of underground storage tank you're talking
Yeah,
about?
that's just a contained place where things go. And then it would get pumped out by a hazmat service, whatever the material might be, from there. So it would never go to the stormwater, to the underground aquifers or anything.
Okay, with regard to the solar, you indicated that the buildings are being designed for future solar, and you're putting in enough steel to support solar. In your experience, have warehouses that were built without solar converted over to solar relatively quickly, or is it easier to put it there first?
Doesn't matter. It's easier to design the steel to accept it now than to reinforce the steel later, so it's good that it's being designed ahead of time. But whether it goes in day one or another day, it's not a problem.
Okay, has the HVAC system been engineered yet?
No.
Okay, so do you have any idea, based on your experience, of whether you're going to be looking at one huge unit per building or multiple units across the rooftops?
It would be multiple units. It's depending on the size of the building, it might be, I don't really want to guess. But it's not going to be one big one. It's a few smaller ones.
Noise-wise, would multiple smaller units make more noise or less noise than one big unit?
Less noise would be fans largely. It's not condensers and things like that. So it's just changing air in the building.
Okay, and would there be a possibility of these roofs having air conditioning units eventually, if a tenant wanted that?
Possibly. But again, speaking from experience, when that's been the case, they've put the condensers on the ground I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but it's something that would evolve as the tenants evolve, but understanding that we don't want to see them, right? So that would be something that gets figured out as that tenant is acquired.
And, excuse me, didn't you also, though, testify there are air conditioning units? There will be small ones
For the office.
for the offices, so that was part of the testimony.
Okay, well, part of my concern on that is there any analysis of the noise level of what would be involved in having rooftop condensers on spaces this large? What would, be the noise in that complex?
Barely.
Ms. Osborne, can you just speak a little more closely into the mic?
There's a very descriptive sound ordinance in the Howell Township, and we would comply with that.
Do you know what the ordinance requires?
I read through it, but I can't give it off the top of my head.
Do you know if you would be in compliance with it right now with the multiple units that are envisioned?
Depends on the unit, it even depends manufacturer to manufacturer at different levels.
That's all I have, thank you.
If I can just ask one follow-up question. Rick, since you've indicated that we will comply, if in fact the specs for the particular unit create a problem, given the distances that are the measure for the standard, would we incorporate some sound mitigation around the unit, to a baffle or something to reduce that, to make it compliant?
Around the unit or where the sound engineer recommends it to be.
Ma'am, you have a question?
Okay, if you could just state and spell your name for the record and give us your address.
Sure. Claudia Malik, M-A-L-I-K, 91 Vienna Road, Howell.
What was the street, I'm sorry?
Vienna Road?
Vienna, I'm sorry.
Vienna. I have a question. I saw that there were 5 drives along Randolph. Can you explain that to me?
That would be that's not this witness. He's the architect.
Okay, all right.
But I should say our traffic witness is coming up, so you'll have a
Okay,
chance.
all right, so then I'll save that for that one. Sorry about that. Hopefully he can answer this one. 142 trailer parking spots, and then 266 loading spaces. We obviously don't know who the tenants will be, right, correct?
Right, but that's also the civil engineer, and we
Okay.
spoke to that last time.
Okay, well, I wasn't here. My concern with that is, again, we don't know who the tenants will be.
Mr. Chair?
The spaces, are they for, like, tractor trailers?
Again.
Just
not the
before
architect.
before you answer that, Ms. Malik, you're listed on the list of clients that, Mr. Calaguire represents. Are you still represented by counsel?
Yes.
Then, while you can testify, the questions have to be asked by your attorney.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I figured I'd give it a shot. Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else from the public? Questions pertaining to the architecture?
Everybody?
Okay. Sir, if you just state and spell your name and give us your address?
Yes, Brandon Real, number 3 Brook Road, Howell.
You're not covered by council, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
And you're not a member or affiliated with Hope?
No. No, I'm friends with them. I'm their neighbors. They're my neighbors, okay? All right, I live directly across the street from this thing. I'm probably the most affected guy in the room. I mean, out of anybody in this building or in the town, I'm their neighbor, okay? So I'm really concerned about something you just said about catchments, draining hazardous waste into a vessel of some kind. This is something I happen to know a lot about. I'm in that business, okay? So what you tell me about what kind of tenants you're going to have. You mentioned L'Oreal and that there was, in a similar project.
Specific tenants.
Okay.
I was answering a
All right.
question from the board.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue that question. Since you are entertaining handling hazardous waste, is the building designed to prevent any leaching from these potential hazardous waste producing companies? In other words, are you going to seal the floors? Are you going to, what kind of vessels are you going to put in? Do you know what kind of tenants you're going to have? You're going to use stainless steel? You're going to use carbon steel? Are you going to coat it with some kind of material that's going to prevent it from leaking into my groundwater?
Before you answer the question, we have not represented that there would be any hazardous material. He was asked a question, and his response was how they might handle it.
Okay.
We have no tenants yet, nor have they represented
Right.
or stated on the record. His examples were other projects he's done
Okay.
at other locations.
I'm asking you how the building is going to be designed to handle all this flexible, possible users of the buildings. In other words, are you going to design these buildings to handle just about anything that comes in, since you don't even know who's going to be renting them? How are you going to design this thing to prevent, the worst case scenario? Are you going to just give you concrete floors with a little ceiling? Or are you going to seal the floors? Or are you going to put a bladder below the building to prevent it from going into our groundwater? And then we're talking about fumes.
Can
Well,
you
what about,
just
let's give him an opportunity to answer.
Okay.
the question?
yes,
He's fishing. I can't answer that question. It's not a real question.
I can't hear you. You got to speak into the mic, please.
Is it on?
It's red.
I might need batteries.
Oh.
While we're replacing the batteries, you can use the center on the
Speak
console.
up. You don't have to talk loud like me.
This is a worst-case question which he's asking, so I don't have a building that I'm designing for the worst case. I'm designing for the building code that's what the building code requires. When a tenant comes in, that's a special circumstance, it'll be taken care of at that time to meet the building code and to meet the groundwater and everything else. But right this second, it's being designed as per the building code.
okay. All right, so is our good, this is not an architectural question. How do I put this in a question pertaining to architecture? Have all the people who are in charge of deciding whether this company puts buildings up that may or may not handle what their tenants hold, how are us concerned citizens, all myself and all my neighbors, going to feel comfortable knowing that you guys just followed the building code?
The building department requires certain aspects. You can go talk to the building department when those plans are submitted to the building department.
Okay, so the buildings are going to be made in a general way and with no preventative measures to prevent spills from your potential customers. That's what you're saying?
Spills of what?
That's the other question. We don't know.
Excuse me. I think the question has been asked and answered, and repeated questions.
Okay.
They are building the buildings. They will design the buildings to the code. If the people who do the reviews of building, the fire subcode, all of the other subcodes, want changes made to it, that will be per the code and their review. Right now, this is purely hypothetical. And obviously, if there are changes to if based upon a particular tenant, there are physical changes that would be required, we've acknowledged that would require a return to the board to change what's being approved now. And of course, after the board would then again go through the various code review processes. So that is not what's proposed at this time, and I don't know that we're going to have a different answer if it's asked again.
Okay, all right, fair. Okay, so my next question is really the first question. This vessel you're talking about, is that something that's going to be equipped with every building? Because you did say that you're going to put a box in, and I'm wondering what you meant by that.
I think what Mr. Pratt testified on was a hypothetical situation.
Okay, okay. All right, fair enough, folks. Thanks for giving me a couple minutes here. I'll be back.
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I just have a follow-up to that. So, I mean, I understand it was hypothetical, but I just want to confirm. So I mean, calling it a box, is that proper language, or what should I call it?
I was striking it.
Excuse me?
Strike it. I'm not an environmental engineer. I'm not a hazardous engineer. I'm just saying that hypothetically, if there were a floor drain, as Mr. Hazar asked, it would be, and there were hazardous...
All I asked was, what do I call it? I didn't get to a second part yet.
Containment vessel.
Containment vessel, okay. I just wanted to use the proper language. I just want to confirm, on the plans that were submitted, there are no containment vessels that are depicted?
No.
Okay. So, and I don't know if this is for you, for council, for someone else, if it became necessary to put containment vessels somewhere, because I don't know, what the size or location would be, is that something that you feel would trigger an amended approval?
I guess it would depend on the definitions in your ordinances. If there are changes that are accepted from site plan, perhaps not. Obviously, we needed site plan for this. So.
And it might be inside the building. It might not be outside the building.
Right. So I can't answer it without reviewing your ordinance to see if there are exceptions to site plan or approvals. If there was further disturbance, I guess the likelihood would be that it was, but that varies by ordinance.
Well, I was just wondering, if it became necessary at some time, whether the board would ever be able to see it or not. So we can defer that answer to another time. But I guess my second question, and again, I don't know if it's for this witness or counsel or somebody else, since there are no, you have to forgive me, I forgot the name I'm supposed to call it. The containment vessel.
You're getting a mental block.
Yes. Since there are no containment vessels that are proposed at this time, is it fair to say that there are no, contemplated uses at this moment that have, the type of potential spillage that would require its use?
I don't think we're in a position to say that. I mean, obviously, cleaning solution could be a hazardous substance. So, and the amount you can keep of different kinds of materials as the witness testified vary. So I don't know what the tipping point is or what kind of occupant. I mean, this is not process, this is warehouse. This isn't a manufacturing facility, so I don't know that we're in a position to say. It seems unlikely, but
Okay.
what did he want to say?
All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I just had a follow-up to that, because maybe it's just the classification nomenclature, but when I see warehouse industrial, and as I sit on the Environmental Commission, an attorney from your firm testified there's going to be, or gave presentation, there would be no manufacturing. Is warehouse industrial just the classification nomenclature? When I hear industrial, I hear manufacturing. What else could it be if it's not manufacturing that would consider it industrial?
We're designing this as a warehouse.
So why does it say warehouse industrial?
Where does it say that?
This is an overall site plan from Dynamic.
I
Sheet
think
number 8.
warehouse comes within the general category of industrial uses.
So is it just a nomenclature thing?
I think so. We can confirm it since they're here. Unchecking. not intended to indicate any other use than what we've represented on the record, which is the warehouse use.
So you have to submit an amended plan. When you submit the amended plan, you'll take off the reference
We'll
to
clarify
industrial.
that. Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else like to ask questions of this witness? Sir, please step up to the podium.
We can ask these questions about how to...
Architectural-based questions, correct?
No, we do self-storage.
Hey, sir, if you could state...
John McNulty, 4 Arnold Boulevard, McNulty.
You're not represented by any counsel?
Excuse me, no,
You're not represented by?
no, not yet. I guess your job is to design boxes that are going to be holding some things, right? Do you include the venting of the boxes and any of the atmospheric situation within or external air that may be emitted from those boxes? Is that part of your design?
Sounds like you're asking if there's a tenant. Am I
Let him just
responsible?
answer the question.
And I'm not getting into a tenant.
Well,
I'm trying not to get involved in saying what's going to be there, because I think everybody's concerned about what's going to happen inside these boxes. I think that's the main concern most of the
buildings
people.
that we're designing?
In the buildings,
Thank
yes. Buildings, box, I'm referring to them simply as a container.
Nice container,
Excuse me?
nice container.
Yes.
So there is...
Can you just ask the question again?
So what I'm asking is, in your design, do you have you included the venting of the buildings, for instance? Is that part of your design? These aren't sealed containers. These aren't sealed buildings, are they?
There isn't, okay, so venting to me implies air coming out.
Well, if the ambient temperature outside is lower than the internal temperature, there's going to be venting. It's going to be we're going to have a problem of, not a problem, but if you go in any building, you're the engineer, you can feel the heat coming up from a building, and it's venting out, it's not going in.
So I'm trying to answer the question, but I understand your clarification. Like I said, there are roof units on the roof that are there for air changes. We're required to have, I think it's 1.5 air changes per hour. So there are louvers on the outside of the building on the dock wall that air will be brought in through those and vented out of the roof. There's, depending on the tenant, depending on the tenant, there are either small fans or big fans to keep the destratification fans but yeah, it gets warm.
So this is another thing that's tenant specific. Okay, so we have to know about that, and it seems like there's a hang-up with finding out what may in the future be the usage.
Well, from air changes, that's required, that's going to be there day one and for the shell, for the box.
All right.
So most tenants don't have more circulation than that. They might have air conditioning in the offices. But
When you say most tenants, you referring to
most warehouse tenants.
You've worked on or you're familiar with?
Right.
The other thing is there any design characteristics of your design, your architectural design, that will support like refrigeration? That's not part of your...
That's not something that...
That's not something you got involved in?
No.
All right. Where does the runoff, the water, this is a flat roof, right, in all these buildings?
It's got a slight slope to it.
Basically. Where does the runoff...
Repeat it so it's clear. Is it a flat roof or does it have a slope?
It's a 1/4 inch per foot slope.
All right. Where does the runoff before that water go to a retention pond?
Site plan question, but.
It's probably a
it's
question
pond
that should have
was-
been asked last time. I didn't ask the question, but I mean,
It's a pond. I can't say whether it's retention, detention,
No,
whatever
but I
it is,
guess,
but that's civil.
let me, are you asking how it gets from the roof to wherever it's going?
yes, that's part of it.
Okay, so there are downspouts that connect
Okay.
directly to.
And the question,
underground
I'll
pipe.
have to apologize beforehand because it's part of the engineer you had last time, but is there different retention ponds for the roof water versus the ground runoff? That's something we'll probably have to address at a later date.
He did testify there's one large detention basin on site.
And that's what I'm concerned about. We didn't talk about anything, water separators for oil. There's not a tractor trailer I know of that doesn't leak. And you have those kind of issues, and if you're mixing in the roof water with that,
I think you're testifying.
yeah.
Asking a question.
We'll have to ask it again, I guess, at a later date. I guess that's about it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to ask questions of this witness? Okay, seeing none, I'll close this portion of the public and call you next witness.
How much time we have?
I was going to let you go to 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you.
Counsel, you're going to have your traffic engineer now?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, just before we do this, I know counsel for the objectors has an objection to hearing this testimony tonight. I don't know exactly what it is, but, counsel, if you want to place that on the record so that Ms. Goncher can respond and the chair can make a decision.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Look, I mean, it's pretty obvious, given the fact that traffic is going to be a significant part of the objection to this, where there are going to be hundreds of tractor trailers on the road once this is all built out. On April 11th, there was responses to the township engineer's comments, and in a few of those, MCC referred to the fact that the traffic report is going to be updated to reflect changes that will be made. So I guess the question I would ask is, given how important all this is, does it make sense, unless council's planning on bringing the gentleman back again, to have him testify tonight, update the traffic plan, and then I presume we'd want to have him back again? Or does it make sense to have him updated and then actually testify to what's in the final traffic plan? That's the objection, so I'm just questioning whether it makes sense to have him here tonight.
Ms. Goncher?
I don't know what you're reading from.
I've got a copy right here. So, Monmouth Commerce Center, responses to township engineers' comments from April 11th. Number 7, there were questions about pavement thickness on Randolph Road.
That's not a traffic, that's a civil engineering, that would be
The
revised.
answer says the traffic report will be updated to reflect same. That's from your client.
Right.
In number 8,
It's an April 11th letter.
Yeah, but we responded.
traffic report dilutes 10% of the truck traffic at Lakewood Allendale Road. Traffic report will be updated to reflect same. Same in number 9.
After the April 11 letter from the engineer, from the township, the report that was submitted subsequent to that was after the April 11, so that information was incorporated in the revised
In
plan.
the April 26th?
Correct.
Sure, okay.
That,
We may look at it again later, but okay. Maybe we'll get to see you again. Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that's your call, obviously, but I mean, so,
Well, I would like to move forward with the
Okay.
testimony.
thank you.
Okay, if I could just swear you in? You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
No. The whole name. Justin Taylor. You got it? There we go. Justin Taylor, Taylor,
Business address is 1904 Main Street, Lake Como, New Jersey.
Justin, could you please advise the board with whom you're associated?
Absolutely. I'm a principal in the firm of Dynamic Traffic. I've been practicing traffic planning for approximately the last 18 years.
Mr. Taylor, we're having a little trouble.
Trouble hear me? Better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania and Texas. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer through the Institute of Transportation Engineering. I've testified at dozens of boards throughout the state of New Jersey, including this board, and have testified in front of other boards on behalf of those boards.
And Mr. Taylor, as I ask all my witnesses, your license is current with the New Jersey State PE Board?
Yes, it is.
Mr.
And
Chair, oh, I'm sorry.
you have no prior actions or current actions against you in front of the board?
I do not.
Okay.
So we just open it to council. Do you have any objections to Mr. Taylor's qualifications?
No objection.
Okay.
All right, we'll accept Mr. Taylor's qualifications as an expert in traffic engineering.
Thank you for accepting him. Okay, Justin, can you tell the board, please, what you did basically to prepare for this hearing and your role in the preparation of the traffic study that was referred to?
Absolutely. As the traffic engineer for the project, my responsibility is really threefold. First, we need to take a look and perform a traffic impact study to determine what type of impact the project will have on the surrounding roadway network. We also work hand in hand with the civil engineer to design the site layout, the driveways, the internal circulation to ensure that there's safe and efficient access for the types of vehicles that are proposed for the site. And the third prong that we look at is the parking, to ensure that there will be sufficient parking to support whatever demand that will be generated by the project. So I'd like to take that really in those three steps. The initial thing that we did was conduct a traffic study.
And can you just to reiterate, I know you referenced
Yes.
it before, but I believe Exhibit A7 references a traffic study dated 3/8/19, last revised 4/26/19. Is that the study which you're referring to?
Yes, that's
All
correct.
right, thank you. Go ahead.
So in order to perform a traffic study, what we need to do is collect data specific to the site we're looking at. We take a look at the surrounding roadways, take a look at intersection control and intersection geometry, we look at the existing traffic on the roadways to get a basis for the design and the impact that our project is going to have. To do that, as a traffic engineer, we look at the peak commuting hours of the roadways, because that's really when the demand of the background traffic will be highest. So to that end, we looked and we conducted counts from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and from 3:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. to bracket the peak commuting hours of the area. These counts were conducted in September and October of 2018 while school was back in session to ensure that we really had a good feel for what was going on currently today. Once we do that, we take a look at the existing operation of the intersections. As this project is located along Randolph Road, we're in close proximity to Oak Glen, to Lakewood Allenwood, and then also, as you've heard, the travel patterns out to County Route 547, we studied numerous intersections. Now, typically for a permitted use, we probably wouldn't go that far, but given the size of the project, we decided that it was a good idea, and with the help of your professionals, we came up with a study area that we should look at in order to assess the impact of the project. This included the intersection of County Route 547 and Randolph Road and Oak Glen Road and Lakewood Allenwood Road, as well as the two signalized intersections on the way to Route 195 at Maxim Road and the Park, and at 549 Herbertsville Road and 547. As I said, once we collected all that data, we conduct existing analyses of the intersections to determine what the baseline is. How's it operating today? And what we find is there are generally good levels of service up and down the 547 corridor. However, at the intersection of Randolph Road and 547, it's currently failing. It's operating over capacity during the evening peak hour because of the existing traffic and the existing uses that are currently on the roadway. We also find such capacity constraints currently existing at the intersection of Oak Glen Road and Lakewood Allenwood Road. Again, that's operating over capacity in the existing condition. Once we've established that baseline, it's then our responsibility to project the traffic that will be associated with a project such as this. Now, I know there was some initial questioning of what we're proposing. For this site, we have utilized the Institute of Transportation Engineers Code, Land Use Code 150, or general warehousing. Because as you've heard from the previous witnesses, we don't have the tenants pinned down. We don't know who's going to be here. I will stipulate, and there was a question by your board planner about, is this going to be a fulfillment center? And I can blatantly tell you, absolutely not. It's not designed to be able to handle that type of traffic that is, while it falls underneath the warehouse category, is a different use entirely. My firm's involved with some of the Amazon designs, some of the current ones they're building, and this site isn't laid out to be able to handle that. If that tenant were to come, you would be redesigning the site, and we'd be back in front of you for both a site layout change, parking layout change, but also a traffic layout change, because the traffic characteristics of something such as this are completely different than the general warehousing use.
Mr. Taylor, just before you proceed a little further, we don't define, that in our ordinance. Can you just maybe give us just a little bit of an explanation of what the difference would be between the warehouse you're proposing and what a fulfillment center is, so we know what you're stipulating to?
So the fulfillment centers, typically Amazon, but there's some others that are coming online now for e-commerce, involve a much more intensive employee count. You have lots of people taking the warehouse and then packaging it into smaller packages to then go out into smaller trucks. And that is not the case here. This is much more of what you would consider general warehousing, where you have large tractor trailers that come in, stuff's offloaded, repackaged, and then resent out. So to utilize the Land Use Code 150, what that does is it's the data collected at numerous large-scale warehouse developments such as what's proposed, and it encompasses both some of the higher and some of the lower generators that fall within that warehousing use. So it's recommended when you do not have a tenancy in line by the Institute of Transportation Engineers to use this land use code, because it gives you a good analysis to encompass all the different uses that might come into the site, all the different tenants that might come into the site. So utilizing that land use code, we generated traffic for the various phases of the job. We then took that traffic and surcharged it out onto the intersections that I spoke of earlier. And that gives us what our build analysis would be. In concert with that, we also met with your professionals and talked to the town about other improvements, other developments in the area that have been approved that might impact the traffic along the network that we looked at. And there were 2 such developments that were required and requested to be included, and we did that within the background growth. The other thing we would do to encompass that and just
Can
make
you
sure...
just mention what those, I'm sorry, can you just mention what those projects were?
Sure. The first would be 41 Randolph, which is directly across the street from us, and the other would be the Monmouth County Transfer Station.
Was the approval of Cornerstone?
Cornerstone was not, at the time we started the study, was not approved. It was not brought to us to be included.
Are you aware of that project?
I personally am not, no.
Is there going to be an updated, because that is a significant project that's on in that area, and I remember the traffic testimony was going to be several hundred cars on, traveling.
Are you talking about the church?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't believe the church is fully approved at this point, is it?
It was just tonight, we just memorialized the resolution for preliminary.
It has a preliminary site plan approval.
So at the time of submission and preparation of the study, it hadn't been approved. And like I said, when we contact the Planning and Zoning Board Secretary to find out what other approvals have been done at that point, and we incorporate that into our study.
I'm not faulting you. I'm asking you, should that be considered into a study, an updated study?
I don't think the impact of that will change the relative impact identified of this project.
Based on?
Based on the volumes associated with the project that we're proposing, as well as the improvements that were identified within the study.
But do you know the traffic counts that was proposed in that application?
I believe you just said there were a couple hundred cars on.
And that won't have any impact?
I do not believe it'll change the relative impact of the project we're proposing.
Wait. Okay, you're being hypothetical here. There were certain improvements that church, as part of their traffic study, which was done by John Ray, all right, we're proposing for the intersection of Brook, Randolph, and Lakewood Allenwood Road, all right? So your conjecture is not appropriate. What Mr. Nicastro is suggesting, and I agree with him, is that you should take a look at that traffic study, all right, and In all likelihood, he's going to come back, all right, and incorporate that into an updated traffic study.
Okay?
It's almost adjacent to this project, so it's going to have relevance.
It's also going to be predominantly on the weekend, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think the peak hours of the church are directly contrary to the peak hours of the warehousing development. But understood, you know, that, now the question is, the improvements there were only going to benefit us as well at that intersection. If they're actually doing improvements at the intersection of Oak Glen, now I was going to get to that in a little later, but there are improvements that we've identified within our study that are going to be constructed by the applicant. And I think that's in concert with possibly the church and its improvements.
Again, that's conjecture because you don't know how much traffic they're adding. So you don't know if your improvements are going to be adequate to support their additional traffic
Let me
and
just
vice
ask-
versa.
In addition to the approvals that you were asked to include in the study, even though I guess one of them had been approved and the other one is not approved, did you also surcharge additional numbers into your calculations based on background county numbers?
We do. We utilize the NJDOT background growth rate of 2% per year, which does encompass other
But
growth in the
Counselor,
area.
that's only background growth, and this is a project that's right specific, right next to you. So it's appropriate to add that traffic in.
So, as I said, we utilize Land Use 150, we surcharge that out onto the other roadway, and then we conducted our analyses of the intersections. I think I should take a step back and talk about possibly the other uses that are permitted within this zone. Now, we're proposing warehousing and only warehousing. I know the plans will be updated to remove any type of industrial nomenclature from them. But industrial is permitted in this zone. Manufacturing is permitted in this zone. General office and medical office are permitted in this zone. And if any one of those were constructed on this site, fully within the ordinance, it's going to generate 2 or 3 times the amount of traffic during these peak hours associated with above and beyond what our actual proposed development would be. So from a land use perspective, the warehouse is one of the lowest traffic generators that's actually permitted within this zone and could be constructed on the property.
Where do you show that in your report?
It's not directly in the report. It was something that was
And if you're going to make that statement without documentation, it's subjective.
Meryl, do you want to introduce the?
Sure.
So I have on there is a table, and then here I have copies.
I do this all the time.
This is something that has not been submitted
It's an
yet?
exhibit, it hasn't been submitted before.
Okay. What are we up to, 821?
22.
822. That's right.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, because this is not my forte, and excuse me if it comes off ignorant. If we don't know the tenants here, and it's just general warehousing, is there just like a standard that we use?
Yes, that's what,
Okay.
Yes.
Can you
So
just-
that could be extremely low, or it could be extremely high?
why don't you
So,
just explain what ITE is to start with?
I'm familiar with that.
Okay, then explain reiterate what you,
so what Land Use 150 does is encompasses all the various types of warehousing. And yes, there will be some that are higher, and there's going to be some that are lower. There's the potential that we end up with some high cube tenants in here, which have, 2 employees per 100,000 square feet, something low like that. And what's recommended without knowing the tenancy, it's recommended by the Institute of Transportation Engineers to utilize this Land Use Code 150 because it does blanket and protect the board in the analysis purposes. And so it gives us a conservative but best estimate evaluation of what the traffic would be for a project such as this.
What's the spread variance on the trip generation chart? And I'm assuming you use version 10.
Yes, we are using 10th edition trip generation. Give me 1 second, I'm going to have to go back to my file.
Yes, here, you can have more, Merle. Thank you.
So utilizing the Land Use Code 150 from the 10th edition of ITE, it's recommended for warehouses of this to utilize the equations as opposed to the rates, but your range of rates runs from 0.02 trips per 1,000 square feet to 1.93 trips per 1,000 square feet, with an average rate of 0.17 trips per 1,000 square feet in the AM, and in the PM, it ranges from 0.01 to 1.8, with an average rate of 0.19 trips per 1,000 square feet.
All right, so what Mr. Kuzer is saying is that there's a large spread variance. Without doing the math, I think in the PM, you could be 9 times the amount of traffic, if I heard your numbers, if I use the upper range there, correct?
I think there's a variance within the whole calculation, that there is a range. And the reason we're utilizing this is because you very easily could have a 20% or 1/10 of the traffic associated with another development within that warehouse. And so what's the guidance that's given by the Institute of Transportation Engineers is to utilize the rates associated with this land use for a development such as this, the warehousing that's proposed as this project.
Doesn't Code 150 include a certain amount of warehousing in it?
150 is actually warehousing.
I'm sorry, office.
Yes, so typically there's between 10 and 12% office associated with the use of the warehouse. There's always going to be a front of house where people need to store. So and that leads us into, I was going to get into a little bit later in the testimony, but we can hit it now. We have 145,000 square feet of office. Every bit of that is designed to be ancillary to the warehouse use. We're not courting any office tenants. This is all just the space that's necessary for a warehouse to conduct its business.
And excuse me, can you just clarify how we came to that number? What did we use, since we haven't designed it? We conservatively estimated.
So we estimated the amount of office that could be reasonably parked on the site. And we took the parking that was available. We took a look at how much warehouse we have and how much office could be accommodated within that, and we come up with the number that we have. So really, we anticipate much less than that. But the warehouse number, the office number is a function of what can reasonably be parked.
And that is consistent with the percentage, roughly consistent with the percentage that's assumed to be part of warehousing based on ITE?
Yes, that's correct.
Just one second. Peter? Yes. Our ordinance, do we have a cap on the amount of office that can be associated with the warehouse?
Allowed 10% retail.
That's something I'll have to check. I don't believe so off the top of my head, but I will check right now.
Okay, could you please?
Absolutely.
All right.
So, I know we were also referring to this. Can we just, did we mark it? I know you marked it.
That was marked as
A22.
A22, traffic generation chart.
Thank you.
And Ron, excuse me, the original traffic study dated March 8th, 2019, revised April 26, 2019, what's that marked as?
A7.
A7.
A7? Thank you.
So referring to A22, to just go in a little bit more detail as I was testifying previously, we ran trip generation estimates based on reasonable sizes that we could fit on the site and park on the site for various uses. The proposed 1.2 million square feet of warehousing, approximately 750,000 square feet of manufacturing, 500,000 square feet of just general office, and 400,000 square feet of medical office. As you can see in the table, we generate during the AM, PM, and Saturday peak hours noticeably less than any one of those other uses. A direct comparison to manufacturing would identify that during the morning peak hour, we would generate 174 trips, whereas manufacturing would generate 465 trips. Likewise, in the evening, you're looking at 177 trips generated by our proposed development versus 503 for manufacturing. And as you go up, the comparisons get even more sizable. If you were to construct 400,000 square foot of medical office, you could have as many as 1,358 trips during the evening peak hour in comparison to the 177 that's proposed here. So the point of this exhibit was really just to show that there are other uses that are fully permitted within this zone that could be constructed here and could have a much more sizable traffic impact than what's actually being proposed currently tonight.
Mr. Taylor, so if I'm reading this right, so say the AM PSH, right, for our project or the project of the applicant, automobiles, is that the AM PSH, say between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m.? It's
Yes, so PSH stands for peak street hour.
okay.
And as a traffic engineer, we study 2 to 3 hours and then take the busiest hour within that. So for our project, we use the varying peak hours, but typically they're about 7:30 to 8:30.
Okay, so from 7:30 to 8:30, it would be 107 cars would be coming into this facility?
That's correct.
107?
107.
I just can't see how that's possible, unless I'm...
No, the reason, and that's, I mean, that's another, this chart kind of backs that up. The warehousing use is not as peaky as some of the other uses that you would have. It's not an office building where everybody has to be there at 8 a.m. What happens is you have, one, you have shift work, two, you have the demand for the truck shipping that comes in throughout the day. It's much more spread out as opposed to being concentrated within those morning and evening peak hours. So based on the ITE trip generation rates, what you're looking at is 107 automobiles coming in during the morning to start that AM shift. You're going to have, and you're going to have 32 going out as the, as either deliveries are coming in or employees are getting off shift or, so essentially what you're looking at is that total combination between trucks and cars of that morning peak hour, that morning commuting hour of 134 trips in and 40 out for a total of 174.
Mr. Taylor, what was your PM street peak hour?
They varied, and conservatively for the analysis, we actually didn't take a network peak hour. We used the individual peak hour of each one of the intersections. So looking down the intersections that were counted, they varied between 3:30 to 4:30 all the way up to 5 to 6, depending on where you were. 5 to 6 closer to 195, 3:30 to 4:30 at 547 at Randolph Road, closer to Lakewood.
Okay, so now, when you did your trip generation rate, you looked at what the street peak hour is, or the trips generated during the street peak hour. Did you also look at the generated peak?
We did not, because the peak hour of the roadway was higher and utilized as
So you did that analysis. You combined the street peak hour and the traffic generated by one, or the model, the ITE code 150, and came up with a number, and that compared that to the generator peak traffic generated with the corresponding street peak hour.
No, we determined the peak street hour of the roadway.
I understand that you're using the street peak hour. I'm asking, what about the generator peak?
We did not look at the generator hour because that's not typically how we would do it as a transportation engineer. Because we find that the worst case scenario typically falls during the commuting hour of the adjacent roadways. While our peaks may be slightly higher earlier in the afternoon or even across those times, what we find is the volumes on the adjacent roadways are lower. And so our impact and the operation of those intersections are not as critical to the determination of our impact as the peak street hour would be.
But you're conjecturing because you don't have the numbers in front of you that could prove that out.
I'm telling you, we followed the prescribed methodology to be utilized for a traffic impact study. We don't typically look throughout the day at the peak generator because, as I stated, the critical impact and the critical analysis happens during that peak commuting hour.
Counselor, I'm asking you, all right, to consider just doing, I'm not asking for a detailed analysis, but I just want to have some representation that during the generator peak, which may occur between, I'm just going to use numbers now, 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning, all right, that the sum of the street peak hour traffic during that time and the generator peak is less than what he's representing as the analysis that he did during the street peak hour. I just want to have that comfort level.
Mr. Chairman, can I just put one thing on? Based on the peak hour of the generator, if we were to look at the peak hour of the generator, based on the ITE rates, during the morning, the peak street hour is 174 trips. The analysis from the ITE calculation is 167 trips during the peak hour of the generator. Now, I know that's counterintuitive, but that's what the ITE data says. In the evening, it's 177 trips for the peak street hour and 209 trips for the peak hour of the generator. So the increase of that 32 vehicles distributed out on the roadway network is not going to have any noticeable impact on the analysis that we conducted.
All right, let me munch that one over, but you can continue.
Where were we?
Mr. Chair,
Are you done with it?
I have,
Yes, Peter?
we reviewed the ordinance both in paper copy and through web search. There's no quantitative limitation on the office square footage, unfortunately, by percentage or otherwise. There's, the closest thing was for gross floor area. There's a 20% cap of office in shopping centers, but other than that, there was nothing specifically called out, unfortunately.
So, if I'm understanding from council, it's been represented that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're capping the office at 10%? Or will you be, if somebody came in, a tenant came in and said, I need 50% of the space associated with office, understanding it's ancillary to the warehouse, would that be what you were building out?
I guess the number that we had come out with is we calculated out of the $1.1 million or million, out of the total, it was 145,000, so it's a little above 10%.
It's about 11.5%.
It was 11.5, and the way we did it is because the parking count, the parking ratio for office is higher. So we conservatively calculated the number and provided the parking at the higher ratio for the office. So in answer to your question, I don't have the representative of my client here this evening, they weren't able to be here, but if the 145 is what can be accommodated, 145,000 total, I don't know if there would be, if 50,000 was in one of the buildings, it would mean that the balance would be the balance of the number we represented. In other words, if one tenant needed it in 300,000 square feet, then it's still 10% overall. I don't know if they would do that, but I think the cap number remains at the 145,000. No matter how it's divvied up, building to building, I guess is what I'm saying.
So then you would accept as a condition, if this board acted favorably on your application, that a cap of 145,000 square feet for office?
Yes.
Ancillary office?
Yes.
That's where I was going with it.
Okay, what do we have?
So now that we've talked about the trip generation that's proposed, we then need to distribute that out onto the roadway network. As we've testified to, the main orientation of this project is the Route 195 corridor. It's where the trucks want to go. That's how they're going to get to and from the places that they're distributing. We also anticipate a good portion of our employees may come from that direction too. So we looked at the distribution, we looked at census data of where people in Howell work, and we came up with two different distributions, one for the trucks and one for the employees, and we routed the traffic associated with each differently. As I said, we oriented all the trucks to 195. I think there's been previous testimony by Mr. Catani that we're going to be signing our driveways for all trucks to make lefts out of the driveway. There will be no trucks permitted to go east onto Randolph to Oak Glen and or Lakewood Allenwood Road. So once we have that traffic distributed, we run our build analyses. And what we find is that...
Can you explain what that is? Just
Sure.
instead of what does it mean to, so what you've done so far is you've counted existing conditions, what exists on the roadway today during the peak hours that you calculate based on actually counting trips. Then you calculate the anticipated traffic coming from the proposed development based on the ITE. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then you said you then distribute it based upon census and other information that you gather, and also, for example, restrictions on the road that wouldn't allow trucks to go in a certain direction. Would that be a...
Yep, that would be another thing that would influence the directional distribution.
And then you, with that analysis, you distribute the traffic coming from the project onto the roadway network.
Yes.
That's where you're at now.
That's where we're at now.
And now you're looking at, and you also calculate in background traffic, background growths?
Yep.
Into that? Okay.
Yes.
And then...
As well as the additional adjacent developments that we were previously discussed.
Okay. And now you're looking at impacts. This is that's the information that allows you to now evaluate potential impacts.
That's correct.
Okay, please go on.
So based on all that, we've analyzed the intersections as I previously described. And what we find is primarily the Route 547 corridor has capacity to handle the traffic as we orient it towards 195. However, the intersection of 547 and Randolph Road, as I mentioned, is currently failing. It's currently, before we surcharge background growth, before we surcharge the other approved developments, it's operating at a level of service F. So the addition of traffic that's not ours is exacerbating that situation. And the addition of our traffic, again, is going to exacerbate that F. It's an intersection that I believe the county is possibly looking at as part of their improvements, and they have a study that's coming through soon, at least according to the county engineer, to look at that corridor. But what needs to happen at that intersection is it really needs to be signalized. And I think your ordinance contemplates a fair share contribution that would be associated with a project such as this. You provide calculations on how to get to that number. And I think that that's something that would most likely need to be done here, that while we are contributing to the impact of that intersection, it's not solely our impact. It's already operating over that capacity. We also, through discussions with the township, have already agreed to widen Randolph Road to provide a 14-foot width on our side, as well as widen Oak Glen to accommodate left turn lanes, both northbound onto Randolph Road and southbound onto Lakewood Allenwood. So that, coupled with the signal, will actually get us to decent levels of service at these other intersections. There are minor signal timing modifications that would have to be coordinated with the county to give a little extra green time to Route 547, but it's something that we feel comfortable and can be accommodated with the ongoing communication we have with the county. We have had preliminary conversations with them. We went down and met with them, talked about the project, talked about what we were doing, talked about what they were doing. And so they're aware that should this board act favorably, that there will be an application to them in the future for them to review what's being proposed here.
Mr. Taylor, of the 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5, right? 5 intersections that your study's based on. Is Randolph Road and 547 the only failing or overcapacity intersection at this time?
No, actually currently Lakewood Allenwood Road and Oak Glen Road fails.
And 547 in Herbertsville and Old Tavern doesn't? I just find that hard to believe, traveling 195 every day.
It does not. The queues coming southbound in the morning
Yeah.
So the county currently has a project that they're reviewing several different designs to ameliorate that issue. They're fully aware of that issue. There are a couple different designs they're looking at, but yes, living in the area too, coming down there, you avoid it if you can.
I'm sorry, which intersection are you talking about?
We're talking about Herbertsville Road, or 549 and 547.
Coming off of 195 and going in the morning onto 195, where it backs up to Soldier Field in the morning.
So you do have E's and D's existing at that intersection, and then as it builds out, just by background growth, let's see, you end up into levels of service F in the future condition, based on just the background growth associated with that.
Future condition, no build.
Correct.
Meaning?
Without any addition of the site-generated traffic, just the additional, the 2% background growth, it pushes it up over that threshold into an F. And again, through the conversations we've had with the county, we know that they are looking to improve that, whether there's multiple lanes that go in, whether they widen 547, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they are looking at ways to fix the issue that they're aware of in that corridor.
I'm sorry, where in your report do you show the future no-build condition?
So we actually, within several tables, because in this most updated study, we broke out analysis into the various phases to show the incremental increase and impact of each phase as it went in. But on page 11, 12, 13, and 14, there are tables 6, 7, 8, and 9, which identify the no-build condition, the build condition, and the build with mitigation conditions at each one of those intersections.
Justin, let me just ask you a quick question on Randolph Road. You designated it in your report on page 3 as an urban local roadway under Howell Township jurisdiction, east and west orientation. According to our master plan, that road is designated as a subcollector roadway.
Okay.
Which technically isn't used for heavy traffic roadways. Now, you're saying that this applicant is looking to widen the roadway to 14 feet, I believe the testimony was?
Yes, 14 feet.
How is that going to change this roadway? That's going to be able to accommodate this increase in this heavy traffic onto Randolph?
I think it's going to widen the section along our frontage.
Are you doing the whole length of, is it the whole length?
No, we're doing our entire frontage.
Okay.
And it's going to widen the road to provide a 2-foot shoulder and a 12-foot lane along the entire frontage, as well as dedicate the right-of-way to meet your master plan half-width to accommodate the traffic that's proposed for the project.
So when you said we're going to do a dedication to accommodate, so the master plan, if I'm not mistaken, this is part of Mr. Herman's letter, was this?
Yes.
This was a request that we widen it, the half-width widening based upon the master plan projection, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Taylor, real quick, just to clarify, in the responses to the township engineer's comments, you indicate that the Randolph Road will be revised to a 12-foot lane and an 8-foot shoulder?
I don't have the responses in front of me, but excuse me, I misspoke. It's an 8-foot shoulder, not a 2-foot shoulder. So it'll be a 20-foot half-width.
Thank you.
All right, guys, it's a little after 9 o'clock, all right? We have another application, and I did promise you to go to 9 o'clock.
I'm just checking if we got a response from someone. Go ahead, sorry.
All right, well, at a minimum, Mr. Taylor's going to have to come back.
Yes.
All right. I would like, if we could, have a special meeting for this application. It would be only this application for July 1st. It's a Monday. The Thursday, July 4th, which, would be our regular, is obviously a holiday. So I know, Chief, you can't make it, all right? I believe, Nick, you can? Rob, you're on vacation, all right? We have 5, possibly 6 members that would be here for that date. Do you want to proceed with that, or do you want to?
Unfortunately, while our traffic consultant is available that evening, the witness, we have a representative from the company, because there had been operational questions, who we can't reach at the moment. We tried emailing since I spoke to you. And our planner, she's not here this evening because she's before another board. We did try texting and emailing, but we have not heard back, so we don't know her availability either for that evening.
So, given that,
Well, there's a couple...
the 18th is,
Mr. Chair, there's still a couple options. I mean, I don't think, we haven't heard a no's from those other individuals yet.
Correct.
So, what the board could do is schedule the special meeting, at least get through Mr. Taylor, and it's possible we could have, that may take a lot of time. We're not done asking questions. He's not done with his testimony. There's members of the public, there's cross-examination from other counsel. I don't think that's just a couple minutes, at the July 1st meeting.
Right.
So it may still be useful. And I leave it, to everyone's, what you prefer as a board and an applicant. But the fact that there are members of the board who are not here, I think it unlikely that we would finish on July 1st. But the members of the board who are not here can listen to the tape, can watch the video, and can become eligible, after that meeting, if that's acceptable. That's just one of the options that we have moving forward. Another option is that we don't explicitly carry it tonight, and if the applicant's professionals become available, they can send out another notice for July 1st. And we would also have to place notice in 2 newspapers 48 hours in advance as a special meeting. But that time is coming pretty quickly.
Would they
So,
have to renotice 10 days ahead?
yeah.
So they're
I would just, Ron, I just want to put on the record, although I have a vacation on July 1st, and I know the chief won't be here. Traffic being the biggest issue in my mind for this application, although I know I could watch and be eligible, I'm going to have a list of questions. So, being that traffic is probably the biggest issue, can we be assured that at least myself and the chief, who we know aren't going to be here, will have an opportunity to get our questions addressed? Chief, I'm not speaking for you, but I know this.
I still have questions regarding the 5 entrances and exits.
Counsel, do you have a response to that?
Well, if we're going to have our traffic witness back, I'd sort of like to
Finish.
have him finish. And
So-
what they're asking is that they can come back again. Is
What's
there
that?
another date that we might do a special? We would like to do the special meeting, obviously, but unfortunately, and it's going to be pretty close noticing if we have to renotice for July 1. Today's the 20th.
Yeah, you're kind of out of time.
We're not going to make it with the 2.5 or 3 day lead time into
Well, we could
the-
carry it without further notice tonight, and we would just have to do the Open Public Meetings Act notice, which is 48 hours.
Right, no, but the
July
other,
18th is our master plan hearing, Guild Petroleum, and New Jersey Natural Gas. That's our next meeting. As far as a special, I don't know anybody's availability.
I had it.
The 18th is a rather full agenda.
Yeah.
It's the master plan, Guild Petroleum, New Jersey Natural Gas is coming back.
Our next meeting after that's August 1st.
what's the next after that one?
August 1st.
That's what I was, doesn't July have a 5th bunch of stuff, bunch of days?
We only have one meeting in July, July 18th.
Well, I think council's asking about special meeting.
Right, if the 1st doesn't work because people are away, I was just, there is a 5th Monday, a 5th Tuesday, and a 5th Wednesday, and sometimes, since the consultants may not have other commitments, because there isn't a 5th.
That's when all of our professional organizations meet, because we're not out at night meetings.
And unfortunately, I don't know their schedule, so I would have to find that out.
Well, that one, there would certainly be time for noticing, that's not.
Yes.
We can, how do you feel about coming back multiple more times?
It's close. I live in Freehold, so.
My concern is that we don't wrap, we can come back, I guess, on the 1st, but then you're asking that whatever the next meeting is, we bring the traffic consultant back.
That's
again.
what the request is of the board members. Unless, we don't know, but unless you had other witnesses to put up in lieu of traffic, I guess.
Well,
But we don't have
believe
that
our
answer tonight either.
What?
But we don't have that answer tonight either.
I think the operator will be there and our
Okay.
traffic. Does that mean we're going to go through cross-examination again? if he comes back and has more questions,
No, no,
then
no.
we reopen.
No,
No, I'm not going to do that, all right? What I'm going to do is, when you bring your traffic engineer back, all right, it's going to be when the chief and Mr. Nicastro can be here also, all the board members who want to ask questions, all right? I want to do it once, then have the opposer attorney.
Right, so that's what I was saying, so then the first doesn't accomplish that.
Right, that's
That's
why
what I was-
we're not talking
Even
about
if we
the
came on
first.
the first, we'd have to come back again, and then,
Right, and I don't want to keep reopening it.
What I was saying was that they could defer traffic, and if they
Mm-hmm.
had other witnesses to put on the first, they could do that.
we know we have the operator, but since we haven't heard from our planner, we don't know yet whether she's available. And I don't want to take it out of order, I want to present my case in my order, because my planner should go last.
Well, Then we'll just have to figure it out and see if we
All
have
right, so
availability on that.
what do
fifth
we
week.
want to do here now? We want to carry this until
Are you okay on the 18th?
July 18th meeting, knowing that we're not going to get to it? And then figure out where we're going from there? I mean, we have members of the public here. I'd much rather give the members of the public the definitive date.
Well, part of that has to do with the availability of the board members as to whether, there's a request for a special meeting in the fifth week of July.
There's also July 15th. If that's a Monday, that's a possibility.
No,
I could check for the 15th
I
and
can't
the
be here.
I
29th.
think I heard a no up there.
Yeah,
I don't
the
think
chief
you'll
said
be here.
no.
No, I got a board that night.
Okay, so that's out.
So, guys, what about,
The 11th, July 11th?
no. What about the fifth week, which is the 29th, the 30th, or the 31st?
Mr. Chair, I'm available the Monday of that week.
I'm good on that night also. Is everybody here good for
good on
July 30th?
30th, no, we have a township meeting.
29th.
Oh, 29.
Oh, I'm
29th
sorry,
is a Monday.
29th. Monday,
Are you the 29th?
the 29th?
I'm good.
No, it's the fifth week, so there's no conflicting.
Do we have a calendar of all the members?
The zoning board's the 22nd. There's no meeting on the 29th. I don't know if the room's available. I'd have to find out from the clerk, but I would go right now that it's probably available.
It's probably available because there's nobody coming up. Would you want to do a special meeting for July 29th?
Again.
All the board is available.
Right, and again, we have to, our traffic consultant is available that evening. We don't know about our,
Mr. Chairman, I think the only thing that we can do tonight, if you want to preserve the notice, is to carry it for scheduling purposes only to the 18th. And between now and then, we can figure out whether that special meeting works. And then we would still have to do an Open Public Meetings Act notice, but we could carry it on the record at the 18th for MLUL notice purposes.
So I hear that the traffic engineer is available on July 29th. If we, and it's going to take probably the whole night to go through traffic, because I got a billion questions also, all right? Would that, I mean, even if we don't use the whole entire night, at least it takes that witness and completes that witness.
Mr. Chair, it's only 4 days to our August 1st meeting. What's on the agenda for that night?
Right now, nothing.
So, I mean, we're talking 4 days to
There
our
are other
regular
applications that are due to be scheduled, but there's nothing right now.
scheduled meeting 4 days
There's
later.
nothing on the August 1st?
I can tell you, we're not finishing KHUV tonight, so we're going to have to figure out where they're going to go also.
And Par Golf, who was given submission waivers tonight, has to be heard within 45 days. I mean, there's other things they just haven't been scheduled yet, so.
Yeah.
And invariably, I hate to throw this out there, but the last 2 years, we've canceled the meeting in August because of vacations and not having a quorum. So,
I'm inclined to schedule it for July 29th. All right. Anybody here have a problem with that?
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
there is a fee associated with that, so if the applicant doesn't want it, we can't impose it on them.
Right. Counsel?
What is the fee?
$1,200.
In addition to the 30 fee? We're just reaching out, we're going to call the client.
And either way, we need an extension of time.
You just got to bear with us for a minute. The applicant is reaching out to see if the ultimate applicant is willing to pay the special fee for the meeting.
Mr. Chair, I think my ultimate recommendation is that we carry it for scheduling purposes only to the 18th, and all of this can be worked out, between now and then.
How do we tell the public?
We
We tell them just that.
an approval, but for the client was just reached.
So for the 29th?
For the special meeting.
Right.
Not,
I am trying to be as clear as possible for the special meeting that we were talking about for July 29th, right?
That's correct.
Right, okay.
We reached out for the client who authorized the expenditure of the $1,200 for the special meeting fee. And since we are we're willing to proceed with the special meeting, with the only assurance I can give you at the moment is that my traffic consultant will be here, since I still haven't reached my other witnesses, we can have our traffic consultant here that evening.
What do you think, Ron?
It's always difficult for me to understand this, but I think we all agree, that we're going to come back on it. It doesn't sound that way, but when I listen to the words, I think we agree.
Okay.
So, for members of the public, what we've just discussed is that we're going to have a special meeting, and the significance of having the special meeting is that this will be the only application on that night. So you don't have to sit through anything else, and the applicant doesn't have to be curtailed in terms of time for other applications, which this board, by statute, has to also hear. So that night will be just for this applicant and just for you and your questions, and cross-examination by the applicant's attorney. They may have more witnesses available than traffic, but as Mr. Chairman has stated, just traffic it will likely be several hours that night. So with that said, the application of Monmouth Commerce Center, case number SP-1052, is going to be carried to the board's special meeting of July 28th, 29th, 2019, beginning 7 o'clock here at Town Hall, same room, same here in the main meeting room. There'll be no further notice to the public, so if you received a notice in the mail initially, you will not receive another one. Of course, if you would like to come down and review any documents, they're on file in Eileen's office in the planning department, and you can do that between Monday and Friday during normal business hours. The board will also put a notice in 2 newspapers at least 48 hours in advance of the special meeting.
And just as a point, that is a Monday evening, not Thursday. So it is not our regular meeting night.
Okay.
And Counselor, I just need an extension of time on the record, please.
Through the end of July.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Planning board will now reconvene. 1 second. Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Goodrick?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Nacastro recused himself. Mr. Schneider?
Yes, here.
Mr. Tannenhouse was excused. Mr. Seaman?
Here.
And Chairman Nash?
Present.
Yes, you still have a quorum.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. Very briefly, this is the Farmer Brown's driving range property. K. Hovnanian's proposing a 4 Seasons project at this property, 111 units. In the interest of time, we're going to, we have one exhibit package that I think we've handed out to everyone. And Eileen, do we want to mark this as one document? It's 10 pages?
Yeah, that's
Ron?
fine.
Okay.
And that's going to be A15.
A15. And our first witness is going to be Dave Fisher from K. Hovnanian.
Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Name is David Fisher, Fisher.
And Mr. Fisher, by whom are you employed and what is your position with your employer?
I'm employed by K. Hovnanian Homes, Edison, New Jersey, and I'm Vice President of Governmental Affairs.
And you're familiar with this project and the design details associated with the project? Is that
Yes,
correct?
I am. I'm responsible for the design and securing entitlements for this development option or approval.
And you also participated in the technical meetings with the town professionals, the board professionals, and town professionals?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Would you describe generally what K-Hub's relationship is to this property and what is being proposed?
Absolutely. We are the contract purchaser of this property, Block 183, and it's in 3 lots, 97, 98.01, and 98.03. The property totals 71.5 acres of land. It's currently occupied by the Farmer Brown Golf Center and is also partially vacant and previously farmed. And adjacent uses, the cover right now is up on the screen, but if we could go to the first aerial photograph, that depicts the property in the center. You can see a faint yellow outline of the property. Roughly 2/3 is previously farmed and cleared and/or occupied by the golf driving range and the batting cages and the small pitch and putt course and the building associated with that. And then there's a considerable amount of wooded area on the eastern part of the property where, I use the pointer here, you can see that mass right there along the brook is primarily freshwater wetlands and buffers adjacent to those wetlands. We submitted our plans back in mid-January to the Howell Township Planning Board, and we were deemed complete by the first engineering review letter on March 1st, and also received a planning review letter, after which we sat down, as Sal mentioned, with the engineering and planning staff from CME Associates. Before I get into that, we have met with the township representatives as well, even before we submitted the application, just so that we could get a feel for issues that might be a concern to the town, including the sewer pump station. So we met with Mr. Herman and some others with the township before we even prepared and submitted the application, so you know. After we met with CME Associates, we reviewed their first set of comments and recommendations, and we decided to go back and revise our engineering plans and documents and resubmit, which we did on May 15th. And after that, we have since received several comment letters from some municipal boards and also, again, from CME for engineering and planning reviews. Those are dated June 14th, and I suspect the board has copies of those review letters. The development that we're proposing, we're excited about being able to bring another Four Seasons community to Howell Township in this part of the town, the eastern part of town. It's within the HD3 zone in Howell Township, which permits age-restricted housing. And we are, as Mr. Alfieri mentioned, proposing 111 single-family detached homes in the form of an age-restricted community. They would be situated on lots of 6,500 square feet, and our gross density is only 1.5 units per acre. So relative to the total size of the property, it's really not that many homes in terms of gross density. The ordinance allows up to 3 units per acre.
Dave, before you move on, can you just, the other 3 corners on the exhibit you're referring to, can you just identify what those uses are?
Sure. When you're driving on Route 33, I don't want to shoot anybody with the laser here. but Route 33 is kind of running up and down in this illustration in the aerial photograph. Equestra is just on the right-hand side from the laser pointer there. As you approach the intersection here of Colts Neck Road and 33, you've got the gas station on the left, and then there's the new Quick Check to the right. And you continue down further east is where there's the trailer park and the new Toll Brothers development a little further on the left. Farmer Brown Golf Center is would be the northeastern corner of the property. And then Colts Neck Road runs to the north, and as you know, dead ends at the fence line for the Earl Naval Weapons Station. So those are kind of the land uses in the area, and they've been changing over the years, and this development, as I said, is consistent with the HD3 zoning. Go to the next one. Thank you, by the way, for advancing the slides. As I mentioned, the density, you can see we've just superimposed the proposed layout on the same aerial, so you can kind of get a feel for how much of the property is occupied by the project. Again, it's roughly, a little less than 2/3 of the site would be developed with roads and homes and recreation facilities and stormwater management basins to handle the development as proposed. We meet all of the zoning, bulk requirements and setbacks in the HD3 zone. The minimum tract area for housing in the zone is 40 acres, and as I mentioned, the property is 71 acres. We have more than enough open space per the ordinance, and the building coverage and impervious coverage, because of the open nature of the eastern part of the property, is very low. We only have 11.5% building coverage based on the total size of the property, and just 20% impervious cover. We do have two relatively minor variances that our planner will address later in the presentation. But first, let me just explain a little bit more about the community and then address some comments that were in the CME review letters. The lots that are proposed for this development would all be 55 feet wide, and they're about 125, 126 feet deep. We're proposing, and I think you could go to the next exhibit. There's an enlarged view of the plan, so you can see the arrangement of lots. And the main entrance for the development would be off of 33, just a little bit further down from where the entrance to the Farmer Brown Golf Center is now, a little further to the east, so as to increase the distance between the entrance to the Quick Check and our new entrance. They aren't really that close. And then as you enter the development, there would be a clubhouse facility on the left-hand side. You can see the parking arrangement right there and the clubhouse, and there's a large wet pond to the west of the clubhouse, and then there's a dry infiltration basin on the opposite side of the entry road right there, both of which would receive stormwater and ultimately discharge to the edge of the wetlands buffer to the east. The balance of the property is, as shown, proposed for single-family homes on kind of a curvilinear subdivision design that would have a secondary entrance out onto Colts Neck Road toward the back of the property. We also have a 50-foot perimeter buffer, not only against Colts Neck Road frontage, but also against the adjacent residential property to the north of us, and along Route 33. The ordinance, actually, there's kind of a double buffer there, and that's one of the variances, because the ordinance, HD3 ordinance, calls for, requires fencing and berms along the Route 33 frontage, which we're doing, but then there's another part of the town's ordinance that prohibits disturbance within the first 100 feet. So we have a little bit of a conflict there, and our planner will address that in the form of the request for a variance. But we've got some nice landscaping and berms along the Route 33 frontage, and proposed entry signs that are included on our concept plan, or our landscape plans. A depiction of that is on the front cover of the package, the entry. We have kind of a double entry and a water feature in each of the entry signs. And we'll have a secondary sign at the back that's a much smaller version without the water feature, but to identify the back entrance. Okay, you can go to the next one. Thank you. Here's kind of an elevated perspective rendering of the clubhouse area, as if you were kind of hovering over the corner, the intersection. And you're looking to the east at the back of the clubhouse. So you see the tennis court, tennis court on the right, which doubles as pickleball court. We installed or proposing to put some retaining walls so that we created a hard edge along the pond, which we thought would be a nice look. Put aerators in the pond. A pool, an infinity pool. It's got a drop on the end, so the pool drops off and the elevation drops down at the western edge of the pool. Bocce courts are in the distance beyond the clubhouse, and so you can see how that arrangement would appear in kind of a three-dimensional view. Okay. I'll just show you three examples of some models we're proposing for the development. This is what we call the Ibiza model, and all of the homes range in size. These range in size from about 2,000 square feet to about 2,650 square feet. And the reason being is we have a single-level ranch option for each model, as well as a two-story loft option. So we add some additional second-story space in each model that we offer. It also creates an opportunity for different elevations. So for a community like this with three model types, each model has usually 4 elevation differences in each version. So you've got 4 ranch options, elevation options, and 4 elevation options for the loft. And that's just one model. So you've got 8 combinations there, and then times the other 2, 24 combinations of elevations. And of course, different materials. With each option, we vary the types of siding, either stone and or brick, and the colors of the siding, so that we've got an interesting streetscape and a variety of homes.
So you're familiar with the township's what's called look-alike ordinance, and you have no problem complying with those requirements, is that correct?
Yes, we are. And as you know, we're building out Four Seasons at Monmouth Woods, and we're dealing with the look-alike ordinance there. And even though sometimes people favor the same kind of model, we've come up with ways to always meet the look-alike ordinance without a problem.
And all the units will have 2-car garages?
That's correct. All have 2-car garages and 2-car wide driveways. In addition, as one of our engineers may mention, the streets are 30 feet wide, so parking would be permitted on both sides. The next is the Killarney model. Again, we showed some different elevations down below in addition to the colored rendering. This model runs from about 2,100 square feet on the low end to 2,750 in the larger loft versions. And the third one? It's what we call the Dorchester model, and we've come up with some new 2-story elevations for that. Again, it's built in the single level as about an 1,800 square foot home. So that's on the small side, but there are people who don't want a very large home when they're deciding to move to an active adult community. And one of the benefits of this model is it's not as deep as some of the others. So it creates a little bit more rear yard space, and in the 2-story elevation, obviously more square footage for people who want an additional room, bedroom, or loft upstairs. All of these would be built slab on grade, foundation types. We don't build basements usually with active adult housing unless there's severe grade changes, and then sometimes we'll do walkouts. We do show on the landscape plans a model park with a temporary sales trailer and 3 models, which would be right in the entrance to the community on the right-hand side. And so you can go to the next one. This is an elevation of the proposed clubhouse. We've designed this as a new clubhouse design. It's a little bit more modern and clean looking. We're excited about it, and for this community, it's about almost 3,700 square feet and has a combination of a reception room when you walk in, a large kind of combination club room with a pub area and a kitchen inside, a separate fitness center room, and then off of that, a yoga room, which can be used for other types of exercises, a card and crafts room, and then men's and women's restrooms, and in the back, there's kind of a covered open patio. where they can kind of enjoy a view of the pool area and beyond. Next. And this is, and then I'll just get into some of the comments from the professionals, kind of a bird's eye view of the recreation clubhouse area. So again, from a two-dimensional bird's eye view looking down at the entrance to the community, the clubhouse parking area, tennis, bocce, pool area is all there, kind of arranged adjacent to that wet pond. And you can see the landscaping and the berms along Route 33 down at the bottom, across the bottom. You can see where the entrance to the Quick Check is, and then up Colts Neck Road, also more landscaping. And someone, our engineer, will mention this little building there is a sewer pump station that we have to install to collect sewer wastewater from the project and discharge into a gravity manhole. The models would be, we'd do a temporary sales trailer on this first lot on the right, and then the next three would become models for the community that we would use during the sales for the proposed development. I mentioned the entry signs, and we've got circulation not only throughout the development with sidewalks on both sides, but we will also be installing sidewalk along our entire Colts Neck Road frontage, as well as along Route 33. So people can kind of circumnavigate the development, but the sidewalk along Colts Neck Road would also help those that live further north on Colts Neck Road so that they've got a safe way of getting from their homes, at least adjacent to our community, on that same sidewalk to the intersection with Route 33. We will create, as we always do, a homeowners association. Sorry. Sure.
The application, we approved an application, I think it was residential, on the lot directly to your east. And one of the things that we asked them was to go to the DOT and discuss about a left turn lane into their frontage, because traffic moves kind of quickly on 33, and it's not good stopping the flow of traffic.
Right.
You don't show that on here. Where are you with DOT and your access?
Okay. Is the application you're talking about a separate single-family home or a development?
Development.
Okay. I know where we are, and we've met with the DOT already, and we've already obtained a waiver from the DOT for our entrance to be located in that location. They've approved the design. However, it will be a right-in, right-out entrance onto Route 33. So no one traveling east on 33 will be able to turn in, and the design, the engineering design of the throat of the roadway, as our traffic engineer can explain in more detail, would essentially prohibit those movements. And you can also not turn left out of our entrance in the front. So people who want to go east on Route 33 will go through the development out onto Colts Neck Road and use the traffic signal, which is safer.
All right, because currently, as you show that island in your entrance roadway does not prohibit that left turn out.
That's correct. So in a way, it's an improvement over the current situation for the golf center right now. People can go in and out of that entrance either, any way they want.
I understand that.
Okay. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, as we always do, we create a homeowners association for all of our active adult communities that is set up with a budget and reserves to maintain properly all of the common elements of the community, including the clubhouse, the recreation, the monumentation for the signage. There's a small gatehouse, although that's not intended to be an active gate. It's a gatehouse structure, but it won't be manned. It's a small community, and it's difficult to burden communities like this with a 24-hour gated entrance. So it'll look like a private community, but there won't be any active gates at the entrance or at the back entrance. And so all of the stormwater management features, the basins, the landscaping would, again, be managed by the homeowners association to ensure that all of those elements are properly maintained and cared for the benefit of the residents. So that's my summary of the community, and I just wanted to, because two of the review letters asked for some commentary on some issues that I may not have touched on yet. So we received, as I said, 2 review letters from CME Associates. I'll touch on the engineering review first. In that June 14th review letter, it asks that we comment on a couple of items, beginning with item 4A, and that deals with kind of the berms along Route 33, which I did mention, a homeowners association, which I just described, affordable housing, which we will deal with just by making an in lieu payment, which is permitted under the ordinance, so we will pay 1.5% of the assessed value for each of the homes in this development times 111. That would go into the township's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We believe that this is a pedestrian-friendly circulation pattern within the development. We also have a small passive recreation spot back further in the development. It doesn't show on that part of the development, but there's a small pocket park where we have some benches, and with the sidewalk around the perimeter, we think that we've created an opportunity for a variety of ways for people to get around within the development. 4B, that's the affordable housing, which I just mentioned. 4C talks about addressing the needs of seniors in terms of access to cultural, commercial, recreational facilities. It's a good comment. However, what we're finding with active adult communities these days, especially single-family detached developments, the vast majority of our buyers are roughly in that mid-50s to early 60s age group. We do get some older buyers, but many of them are still working part-time. They're very mobile. They usually don't require, senior services for older adults like transportation and access to medical facilities because they still drive. And so I think that there will be, a very kind of young complement of residents and buyers in this community, most of which come from the surrounding area. There'll be local residents and from others from Monmouth County towns. That's what we've seen in Monmouth Woods, and we expect to kind of attract the same buyer profile for this development. The amenities I described, which was 4D. There's a question about 2 small open space lots mentioned in 4F. Lot 113.
Hold on.
Yes.
All right. In 4D, there's discussion about special events usage, weddings, parties.
Correct.
What's your position
Well,
on that?
we leave that to the association. Most communities, I think, at a certain point in time, decide to permit residents to have small parties in their clubhouses under certain limitations. But we don't usually dictate that from the beginning, because we want the community to make that decision. Certainly, there's that opportunity in the bylaws for the association to come up with rules and regulations about, that permit their residents. I don't know of any communities that have allowed anyone outside of the community to use the facility. It's not intended to be used that way.
All due respect, your parking is not going to
Correct.
support. So would you have any objection as to if it was a condition of approval, if this board acted favorably, that clubhouse could not be used for any external events, weddings or things like that, and the usage of that building, parties would be restricted to whatever the residents needed?
I think that's a fair requirement. Yes.
Just a question also, when we're talking about the future homeowners association. I mean, in the initial goings, KHUB will control the homeowners association, correct?
We will, right.
And is it typical that that also involves at least the first drafting and approval of bylaws?
That's correct. We
Yes.
always establish the public offering statement and the bylaws from the start, and
Well, I'm
we
just
control the
asking,
board.
because, I mean, it's not like some future group of people that we're talking about. The bylaws are going to be adopted by the
Yes.
applicant here.
Mhm.
Okay.
So on getting back to 4F, Lot 113 is a very narrow open space lot adjacent to that first lot on the left as you enter the development. Rather than make that a corner lot and create a side yard for a large side yard, we decided to keep that as open space. So it's actually a small open space lot. It could become part of the same lot that the clubhouse is on, rather than be a separate lot. But it's just intended to be maintained as common area open space. And lot 114, Ben, if you don't mind going back to the overall site plan layout. Lot 114 is back right there. It's a kind of a triangular shaped property that when we changed the layout slightly to shift lot lines based on comments we received from the board's engineer, it created a very large side yard for that lot. And we said instead of leaving that as part of a lot, we created a small open space lot. And that's where we have like a little walking trail that comes off the sidewalk, curves off the sidewalk. There's 2 benches and some landscaping. So it's just kind of like a small little seating area. And that's those 2 lots. The 4G gets into some phasing issues, and we did identify phases on one of the engineering plans, which was done primarily to demonstrate how the development of the community would progress from beginning to end, from the south side of the project to the north side. As you can expect, with all of the improvements being concentrated up front in terms of the clubhouse and the stormwater basins, that's where the focus and the beginning of this project will be. So the first phase is essentially established right where the clubhouse is, and then the first street where the models are, and then sales would progress from front to back. It was really done more for kind of house construction and sales purposes rather than infrastructure. Infrastructure for this development, in some ways, has to go beyond that first phase because we do have to install water that becomes looped to Colts Neck Road. Our engineer can get into that in more detail. So what we'll have is, and talking about kind of the full build out of the project, a development that will begin with obviously grading and site work, and then utilities, and then base road construction, so that we could get to the point where we could obtain building permits for the clubhouse and the first homes and models. And that will take the better part of probably 6 to 8 months or more. At the same time, we'll be constructing a pump station, which usually takes close to a year. And so while all of that is going on, we hope to get to a point where we can pave enough of the roads to get into the development, create a loop on that first looped roadway, and begin construction of the homes as well as the clubhouse. Full build out from start to finish will probably take on the order of 4 years. The sales at a pace of 3.5 to 4 per month would be in the 27 to like 32 month range, but we have some obviously site work to do before we get to selling and closing homes.
Wouldn't you have to put in that the main spline roadway with the access out onto Colts Neck?
We thought about that, especially with sales beginning at the entrance to the community. What we may do, and this is do a temporary roadway out to Colts Neck Road here before we complete all that infrastructure. We think that would work, and we'll talk to CME Associates in the town about that. But it came up, we thought about the same thing when we saw this comment about phasing, because that would be a limitation, obviously. If you don't have the ability to go out the back and come to the light and go left, then you're limiting what people can do when they come to your community, especially as sales begin.
And when we come back at the next meeting, we'll have a phasing plan that shows that phase, just so everyone sees it.
Very good, thank you.
And we'll work with your professionals to make sure it works.
Okay, so I think that was the main issues. The last thing was where we are with other outside agency approvals. And just very quickly, we have a preliminary approval from the Township Water and Sewer Departments on our submission. They'll wait till the planning board acts before we get final approval, and then the water gets designed by New Jersey American Water Company. The sewer has to go to Manasquan River Regional Sewerage Authority, and then to DEP for treatment works approval. So those are still yet to come. We do have preliminary and final approval from the Monmouth County Planning Board, already in place as of March 11th. We just received our freehold soil certification on June 13th. Just came in this week, or end of last week. The freshwater wetlands were delineated quite some time ago. There was one even earlier, I think, than 2015, but there's 2 LOIs, the letters of interpretation on the property. One that deals with the wetlands, the one lot that has all the wetlands on it, and that was issued in 2015, so it's still good through next October. And then there was a reissuance of what's called a presence absence LOI, which means no wetlands on the balance of the property, and that was just reissued in February of this year. We've submitted our wetlands permit plan to DEP for some buffer averaging along the wetlands and also for the stormwater discharge from the infiltration basin. And we've worked out all the issues with the department. I think their 90-day approval deadline is coming up next month. So we expect the DEP to issue its freshwater wetlands permit and flood hazard area permit for the development next month. And as I said, we obtained a waiver from DOT based on the access level of Route 33 for our entrance design, but we have not yet submitted for the highway access permit. We wanted to get through the planning board before we did that. And that's about it.
There's one, and the technical comments of the engineer report on page 5, there's a comment
Correct.
about the lighting that we need to address.
Yeah, we've run into this in several communities now, and I know, there are towns that promote LED lighting, and we're not opposed to LED lighting, but with JCP&L, it becomes an issue for 2 reasons. One, they've got very limited LED lights, and they do use high-pressure sodium. We don't intend to use metal halide because that gives off a bluish tint, but we use high-pressure sodium with JCP&L usually, not just because they're less expensive to install, but they're much less expensive to maintain. For the town, the rent rate is about 3 times higher for LED lights. In fact, recently in a subdivision where we were asked to install LED street lights in East Brunswick, after they found out what the rent rate was going to be for those, because they were public streets in a single-family subdivision, they asked us to actually go back and change the plans to high-pressure sodium. So we would prefer to use the JCP&L high-pressure sodium direct bury lighting and for all of the internal streets. And we think that can be done. The same thing was used at Four Seasons at Monmouth Woods, and that similar kind of colonial lamp head fixture, we think with you choose to use the nicer pole, is not a bad-looking fixture. So.
So the fixture will be dark sky compliant?
Yes, meaning they're properly shielded and.
Downward
Yes,
light?
those lamps can be shielded from the residential side.
I'm
No?
not concerned about the residential. On the residence, it's supposed to be downward.
Oh, downward.
It doesn't
Right.
light up.
Yeah, our landscape architect can talk more about that. I'm not an expert on lighting, but I know enough about how we deal with JCP&L to know that we'd prefer to go with the HPS lighting. And then we just had a couple of comments in the planning letter. That again was June 14th, 2019. 7F talked about the wetlands transition area extending on the backs of 2 lots. There is a 150-foot buffer from the wetlands that we are averaging, which you're permitted to do under DEP regulations. So you can reduce the buffer to 75 feet. And because of our layout and the street design, it was very difficult without a major interruption in how this project was going to be laid out to avoid a minor encroachment of the wetlands transition area on the backs of 2 lots. So we're going to have a restriction, and we've encountered this before, and it's right in this area. You can probably see it right there, that little bow onto the backs of 2 lots, about 6 or 7 lots up from the beginning of that street, where we will have a conservation restriction on the backs of those single-family lots, and we expect the DEP will probably require us to fence that as well. So there won't be any opportunity for the residents to disturb it. In these types of communities, we don't usually have a problem because all of the common areas are managed by the association. And, we've had this situation before in other active adult communities, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. But that's what that's about. The lookalike ordinance was also mentioned in 7.
Peter, is that acceptable?
Yeah, I would say if DEP does not require a fence, if some kind of signage or some kind of indication could be provided just to be conservative,
Sure.
that might be a good way to go.
In fact, we saw that in one of your other comments about monumentation along the wetlands buffer line. DEP will require something along the buffer line. Sometimes they insist on a fence and other times they don't. But when they don't, we end up having to put signs like every 50 or 75 feet with like a small sign on it that says, restricted conservation area, do not disturb. So it will have, either one. 7G was the lookalike ordinance, which I just mentioned a little while ago. And 7H3 was also a comment about the phasing and, the timing of improvements relative to the start of construction and the build-out of the community. So if there are any other questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them, but I think I covered most of that. 7J dealt with the secondary sign. We didn't initially put a second sign at our back entrance, but then we realized that the ordinance permits it, and it's smaller in size. It's shown on the landscape plans, and we think it's a nice addition to the community. So we do have a secondary sign at the Colts Neck Road entrance. And I mentioned the gatehouse. Even though it's there in structure, it's not an active gatehouse. And I discussed the outside agency approvals. So I think that was all I intended to cover, unless there's other questions from the board or your professionals.
Anyone have questions?
No, but I will make a comment that in my little over 2 years on the board here, this is one of the most thorough and comprehensive presentations I've seen up here, so very nice job on that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Fisher, when will the sales trailer be removed?
We usually time that with completion of sales.
But like how long after the last sale will it be gone? A week, 2 weeks?
I think 30 days,
30 days.
Is a reasonable time frame.
Okay.
And, oftentimes we will use a temporary sales trailer at the beginning and then convert the garage of one of the models into a sales office and then remove the trailer early. So we'd like the approval for the trailer to be there for the duration of the sales of the community, but sometimes we'll make that change. So it could work
But
either
at a
way.
minimum, it'll be removed within 30 days of the last sale.
Yes.
Mr. Alfieri, there's also a email that came in today from Justin Yost. Unfortunately, June 20th at 5:14 p.m. I don't know why we couldn't wait it a little later. I don't know if you want.
Our engineer, we'll discuss that through our engineer when we get to the engineer.
Okay, fine.
Is that dealing with Colts Neck Road?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You have a copy
Any questions? Anyone from the public who would like to come up and ask questions of this witness? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion for this witness.
So how much more time do we have? Because we have several witnesses, and we'll try and fit one that fits within your time frame.
Well, I'm half asleep here.
Go ahead, ladies, stand up. Take your nose so you can stand up. Ma'am, do you want to?
Were you going to present more witnesses tonight? Do you want me to hold my questions until you put more witnesses on?
Well, no, I mean, this witness is done, so if you have questions for this witness, now's the time.
I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just move here, or do you want
No,
me to?
we have to get you on the mic because we're required to make a recording. Okay, ma'am, if you could just state and spell your name for the record and give us your address.
Certainly, it's Mary Elizabeth Garrity, White House, WHITEHOUSE, and my address is 480 Colts Neck Road.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sure this is not your question, so I'm going to hold this one. I had a question with regard to the water table in the area. Would this be something that you could address, or it has to be limited to your testimony?
It's limited to his testimony.
Okay, that's why I asked the question earlier.
And just to be clear, he didn't provide any professional testimony. It was an overview of the project. So they still have an engineer and a planner that are coming up.
Okay, then I have one quick question, and then you can tell me whether it's appropriately directed to him or to somebody
Sure.
else. There is a bus stop on that road. Is there some, on Route 33, are there some plan to keep it in place, or is it going away?
You be able to answer that, Mr. Fisher?
I wasn't aware of that. So the bus stop is on the Farmer Brown property?
The bus
On that
stop
side?
is on the edge of the Farmer Brown property. The bus stops there and picks up people, I guess, going into Freehold or other,
So it's heading
heading
westbound?
toward, towards Freehold, the borough.
Yeah, is that a New Jersey Transit bus, you know?
Whatever buses are going that way, didn't pay attention to whether they're Academy or New Jersey Transit.
We'll have to look into it. None of us were aware of that.
Yeah.
Our traffic expert might be, but we didn't get to him yet, but we'll look into it.
But it seems to be like a fairly permanent bus stop because I see the buses stopping and dropping people off, so I just thought I would mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks then.
Appreciate it.
Get on the road around.
Want to call it a night?
We-
Alfieri,
understood.
consensus says the board has had it for tonight.
I understand. Eileen and I already spoke about the next meeting to save you time, and all of our experts are available on August 15th, which I'm told is an open date for you as well.
I guess so. We're good on that?
Yes, there's nothing on there right now.
So, and for the record, the applicant grants the board an extension of time in which to act through you wanted to say September 15th in case you cancel the August 15th
That's
meeting?
fine, thank you.
All right, so the application of K. Hovnanian Four Seasons at Colts Farm LLC, case number SD-2986, be carried to the board's August 15th, 2019 meeting, beginning 7 o'clock here in the main meeting room at Town Hall. So members of the public, if you received a notice for tonight's meeting, you're not going to receive another notice in the mail. This is your notice that the next meeting is going to be August 15th, 2019. And of course, any documents are available in Eileen's office during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, if you'd like to take a look.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Brain dead here right now.
That's right.
Chair, is reason to go into executive?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Schneider motions, second? Second. Mr. Seaman seconds, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Meeting's adjourned, thank you. You know, Chief's point though.